Chapter 1918. Wuxia's expression was a little strange. Is this guy here to act cool? At this time Zhou Xian suddenly said, Brother Wuxia, can you tell me more about the city of myriad domains? Wuxia hurriedly nodded, of course. The city of myriad domains is divided into 3 camps. The first is my divine Dao nation, the second is the wildlands, and the third is the heavenly abyss sacred gate. Zhou Xian frowned slightly. Wildlands? Heavenly abyss sacred gate? Wuxia nodded. The wildlands are my divine Dao nation's mortal enemy. Back then, when His Majesty the Divine Emperor conquered the various worlds, the wildlands divine race refused to submit. Thus, the Divine Emperor banished them to an extremely remote wildlands continent, which is the wildlands. Now, the wildlands celestial race has regained some vitality and has been going against my divine Dao nation. Zhou Xian was a little puzzled. Why didn't the Divine Emperor directly exterminate the wildlands celestial race? Wuxia shook his head. I don't know. Zhou Xian nodded slightly. What about the Heavenly Abyss Sacred Gate? Wuxia said, the Heavenly Abyss Sacred Gate was once the number 1 sect and is still the current number 1 sect. Back then, before the Divine Emperor was born, they were the strongest sect in the myriad worlds. Moreover, the Divine Emperor seemed to have a deep relationship with them. But for some reason they moved away and never stepped into the Divine Dao nation again. Zhou Xian nodded. I understand. Then he looked around. Do they usually fight? Wuxia said solemnly. Not usually. Zhou Xian frowned slightly. Not usually? Wuxia nodded. Not only do they not fight, they usually trade with each other. As he spoke, he pointed to a street in the distance. That's the Black Market Street. If you have any treasures, you can go there to sell them. Zhou Xian looked at the street in the distance. There were quite a number of people setting up stalls on the street. Wuxia said, that is the only absolutely safe place in this city because no one dares to make a move there. That place is protected by the 3 factions' bosses. Of course, if you want to enter and sell something, no matter what you sell, you have to hand over 10% of the transaction to the 3 factions' bosses. Zhou Xian was a little curious. 3 leaders? Wuxia nodded. Our Divine Dao nation's boss is Fong Lin. This person's background is a little mysterious. There are rumors that he is the crown prince of the Divine Dao nation's number 1 clan, the very first clan. There are also rumors that he is a member of the royal family. His true identity is unknown. Zhou Xian was curious. How does the very race compare to the Divine Marquis manor? Wuxia said solemnly. At the beginning, the 2 families were actually equal in strength, because the Divine Marquis and the Supreme Divine Image were the most important figures by the Divine Emperor's side. But as time went on, the Divine Marquis Palace fell behind the very race. This is because the Divine Marquis Manor has never produced any super geniuses, but the very race has produced a few. Zhou Xian smiled and asked, what about the Divine Dao nation's royal family? Wuxia hesitated for a moment before he said, Brother, it's not my place to speak about the matters of the imperial family. Zhou Xian smiled. What I'm more curious about is that there are so many noble families in the Divine Dao nation. Don't they pose any threat to the imperial power? You should know that if an aristocratic family is powerful enough, they will definitely threaten the imperial power. Wuxia smiled bitterly. How would I dare? Zhou Xian was curious. Why wouldn't I dare? Wuxia said solemnly. There are many reasons why the Divine Dao nation's royal family has been able to exist until now, but the main reason is that every generation of Divine Master is not a pushover. Moreover, the Divine Emperor has decreed that the throne of the Divine Dao nation is only passed on to the virtuous, not the eldest. This virtuous also includes women. As long as you have the ability, even a woman can become the queen of the Divine Dao nation. Zhou Xian frowned slightly. If a woman is the queen of the Divine Dao nation, this chapter is not over, please continue to the next page. Queen, doesn't that mean that the Divine Dao nation could become someone else's? Wuxia smiled. A woman's child can also inherit the throne, but they must have the direct bloodline of the Divine Dao race. To be more precise, a woman's child's bloodline will be devoured by the Divine Dao bloodline from the moment they are born. Moreover, if a woman is the queen, her child must be born with the Divine Dao surname. Zhou Xian said softly, so that's how it is. Wuxia continued. Moreover, the Divine Dao race has an extremely terrifying Divine Dao army left behind by the Divine Emperor. Back then, this divine Dao army followed the divine emperor to conquer the myriad heavens and has never been defeated. Even the strongest barbarian cavalry of the barbarian divine race was defeated by the divine Dao army. Hearing this, Yi Xian was a little curious. Could his divine emperor token mobilize the divine Dao army? He felt a little uncertain. Wuxia continued. The boss of the barbarian lands is called Ti Anu. This person is not from the barbarian divine race, but his position in the barbarian divine race is extraordinary. Even some of the direct descendants of the barbarian divine race are willing to obey his orders. Yi Xian asked, "What about the heavenly abyss holy gate?" Wuxia said, "The heavenly abyss holy maiden, her name is unknown. She is a very mysterious woman who rarely appears." Yi Xian was a little curious. If they don't fight, then what's the point of this place? Wuxia pointed in the distance. Behind this heavenly abyss city, there is a mountain range and there is a ruin in the mountain range. No one knows from which era, but that ruin is the real reason everyone came here. However, we can no longer enter its depths because it involves the 10th layer of spacetime. Yi Xian smiled. The divine Dao nation didn't want to take it for themselves. Wuxia shook his head. They wanted to take it for themselves, but in the end they compromised. Because if the divine Dao nation wanted to take it for themselves, the heavenly abyss holy gate and the barbarian lands would join forces. This is not what the divine Dao nation wants to see because the heavenly abyss holy gate has always been neutral. Yi Xian asked. The divine Dao nation has never thought of roping in the heavenly abyss holy gate to deal with the barbarian lands? Wuxia smiled bitterly. I don't know about that. Yi Xian smiled. Brother Wuxia, let's part ways here. With that he walked into the distance. Wuxia hesitated for a moment then asked, Brother Yi, where are you going? Yi Xian didn't answer and disappeared into the distance without looking back. Wuxia glanced at Yi Xian, who was at the end of her line of sight, and said softly, What a weirdo. Yi Xian directly left the city of Myriad Domain and came to a mountain range. His goal was also the ruin. He actually didn't have much interest in the treasures in the ruin because with Xiao Ta and the Azure Profound Sword, he really didn't have much interest in other treasures. In a short while, Yi Xian came to the depths of the mountain range. At a glance, the mountain range in the distance was hazy, completely illusory. Not simple. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian continued forward. When he came to the deepest part of the mountain range, Yi Xian frowned because he discovered that the spacetime here was somewhat different. The spacetime here had changed. The place he was in now was actually the 8th layer of spacetime, but nothing around him had changed. What's going on? Yi Xian frowned. This place isn't simple. After a short while, Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings and continued forward. When he crossed a small river, he stopped because he discovered that he'd entered the 9th layer of spacetime. The 9th layer of spacetime. Yi Xian frowned. This place was so weird. The further he went, this chapter isn't finished, please continue. The spacetime here was stronger. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian continued forward. When he entered the 9th layer of spacetime, Yi Xian secretly became vigilant. Even though there were no changes in the surroundings, he still didn't dare be careless. He continued forward, and it didn't take long for him to arrive at a valley. After entering the valley, his expression gradually became serious because he noticed that the spacetime pressure in the valley was growing stronger and stronger. At this moment he didn't have the Azure Profound Sword, so he could ignore the spacetime pressure. So he had to be careful. At this moment Yi Xian stopped in his tracks. Not far in front of him sat a man. The man's head was lowered and there was no sign of life. It was obvious that he'd died. Yi Xian walked in front of the man. The man was still holding a storage ring in his hand, and there was a spear on the ground. The spear was pure white, and it was obvious that it wasn't an ordinary item. Yi Xian glanced at the man and he was a little curious. How did this guy die? At this moment, footsteps sounded from the side. Yi Xian turned to look. Not far away, a woman was slowly walking over. The woman was wearing a dark purple dress, and her face was covered with a veil. Her true appearance couldn't be seen, but her figure was excellent. The woman looked at Yi Xian. Who are you? Yi Xian cupped his fists. Yi Xian. The woman frowned slightly. Yi Xian. Yi Xian nodded. The woman shook her head. Never heard of it. Yi Xian smiled. Miss, you are? The woman looked at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Yi Xian shrugged and walked into the distance. At this moment the woman said, If you continue forward you will die. Yi Xian looked into the distance. There were 2 mountains in the distance, and between the mountains was a crevice. Below the crevice was a xiaodao. It was very small and only enough for one person to pass through. Yi Xian turned to look at the woman and asked, "What's in front?" The woman said, "The gate of the ruins." Yi Xian asked again, "Miss, do you know what ruins are inside?" The woman looked at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Yi Xian blinked. "Am I very handsome?" The woman was slightly taken aback. What was he talking about? Yi Xian smiled. "Miss, if I'm not wrong, you should be the mysterious Heaven Abyss Holy Maiden, right?" The woman nodded slightly. "Yes." Yi Xian smiled. "My name is Yi Xian. What about you?" The Heaven Abyss Holy Maiden didn't say anything again. Yi Xian shook his head, turned around and left. The Heaven Abyss Holy Maiden said again, "You will die." Yi Xian didn't even look back. "None of your business." With that he quickly walked toward the xiaodao. "Arrogant? I'm more arrogant than you." Hearing Yi Xian's words, the Heaven Abyss Holy Maiden frowned. "How rude." In the distance Yi Xian had already walked in front of the xiaodao. When he was about to step into the xiaodao, his expression suddenly changed because he realized that the spacetime in front of him was no longer the 9th spacetime. The 10th spacetime. The spacetime in front of him was already the 10th spacetime, and the spacetime pressure in it was no longer something he could withstand. If he forced his way in, as the Heaven Abyss Holy Maiden said, he would really die. But if he retreated now, wouldn't it be very embarrassing? And it would be embarrassing in front of a woman. Yi Xian thought about it, then turned around and left. Damn it. He didn't have any face, so how could he lose it? End of this chapter. Chapter 1919. Seeing Yi Xian retreat, the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden's eyes were calm, as if she was not surprised at all. After Yi Xian retreated to the side, he sat cross-legged on the ground and pondered. The 10th spacetime. He had already felt the 10th spacetime just now, and the spacetime pressure contained in the 10th spacetime was not something he could withstand at the moment. At this moment Yi Xian was a little curious. What kind of relic was this? Would there be an 11th spacetime behind it? At this moment, the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden walked to Yi Xian's side and glanced at Yi Xian. Seamless realm. Yi Xian ignored her. The Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden continued. "You were able to reach here with the seamless realm, not simple at all." Yi Xian still did not speak. Seeing this, the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden frowned slightly. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly got up and walked to the front of xiaodao. Looking at the xiaodao in front of him, Yi Xian was silent for a moment and he suddenly stepped out. As his foot landed, the spacetime around the xiaodao directly distorted and became illusory. Seeing this scene, the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden's pupils suddenly shrank. At this moment Yi Xian retreated again, and at this moment his eyes were filled with excitement. The reason he could step into the 10th spacetime just now was because he had used the mysterious spacetime in Xiao Ta's body. He could already use Xiao Ta to fuse with that mysterious spacetime, and that mysterious spacetime had absolute suppression on the 10th spacetime. Unfortunately, he could not fuse with that mysterious spacetime for too long. However, he was not in a hurry. He could take it slowly. At this moment, the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden suddenly asked, "How did you do it?" Yi Xian ignored the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden and sat cross-legged to recover his vitality. Every time he used that mysterious spacetime, it consumed a lot of energy. Seeing that Yi Xian did not reply, the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden frowned slightly. "I'm asking you a question." Yi Xian turned to look at the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden. "Am I very familiar with you?" Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden. Yi Xian retracted his gaze and continued to devour the soul crystals. Yi Xian liked to make friends, but he didn't like to make friends with arrogant people. "Arrogant? I'm more arrogant than you." The Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden glanced at Yi Xian and did not ask further. He also had a temper. An hour later Yi Xian suddenly stood up and walked toward xiaodao. The Heavenly Abyss Saintess hurried to look at Yi Xian curiously. Yi Xian stepped into the xiaodao. The moment he stepped into the xiaodao, the 10th spacetime in the xiaodao area became illusory. It wasn't that it couldn't withstand Yi Xian, it was that it couldn't withstand that mysterious spacetime. After taking 3 steps, Yi Xian suddenly retreated. Seeing this, the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden frowned. "Why did you retreat? Continue walking." Yi Xian turned to look at the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden. "What does it have to do with you?" Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and continued to devour soul crystals to recover his energy. The heavenly abyss holy maiden walked to Yi Xian's side and looked at Yi Xian. What secret technique did you use to step into the 10th spacetime? This secret technique consumes a lot of energy and you can't use it for a long time, right? Yi Xian didn't answer and continued to devour soul crystals. The heavenly abyss holy maiden glanced at Yi Xian and didn't say anything else. A moment later, Yi Xian suddenly stood up and walked toward Xiao Dao. Just like that, Yi Xian entered the 10th spacetime again and again. At first he could only take 3 steps, but now he could take 10 steps. Not only that, after fusing with that mysterious spacetime he could last for 12 breaths. He was passing through the 10th spacetime in front of him. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From now on Yi Xian's position as the crown prince will be removed and Yi Lang will succeed him. The one who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a young man with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. And on both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this moment, a timid voice suddenly sounded in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's biological sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the crown prince. Why did you remove him for no reason? The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid and did not dare to look at the great elder, but she did not leave. Instead she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed again to the elders on both sides. Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan and his life is uncertain. Yet the clan is using a groundless excuse to remove him from his position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. Whether he is removed or not, it is not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this moment the new crown prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The great elder said coldly, then flog 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, even now he is fighting for the clan, but the clan is so unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince Yi Lang, and he knew that this was his chance to show off. The guard sneered, Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of crown prince. It is the wish of everyone. What are you shouting for? As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen, but she did not cry. She just covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the crown prince I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. I will go through fire and water for the crown prince, even if I have to die 10,000 times. Yi Lang nodded slightly. Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't show any mercy, understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. Immediately he grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, which was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian who had rushed back from the South Mountain. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, his face dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak, when Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yiling did not stop there. He charged at Zhang Mu once more. At this time Yilang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yilang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and said, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked up to Yiling. Seeing Yiling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed out. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides there were the Yi clan elders. "Why?" At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yiling and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yiling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yiling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, "Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you discard him for no reason?" The Great Elder looked at Yiling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for? Leave." Yiling was obviously afraid and did not dare to look at the Great Elder, but she did not leave. Instead she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides. "Elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan and we don't know if he's dead or alive. But now the clan is using a groundless excuse to discard his position. This is unfair. Impudent." The Great Elder suddenly raged. "Whether he discards his position or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time the new prince Yilang suddenly laughed. "You should be flogged 30 times as a warning." The Great Elder replied coldly, "Then flog her 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yiling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he is fighting for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yilang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yilang inherits the title of prince and it's everyone's wish. What are you yelling about?" As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yiling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded and the right side of Yiling's face instantly swelled up. But she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yilang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yilang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. "This subordinate will go through fire and water for the prince and I will risk my life for him." Yilang nodded. "Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't show mercy, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yilang and when he saw the murderous intent in Yilang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yiling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to see something and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe and the robe was tattered and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yilang's lips curled into a sinister smile. Inside the ancestral hall the elders frowned. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes. and his expression was frighteningly gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his expression turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his expression changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak, when Yi Xian suddenly leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Boo! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's expression turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and snarled, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Chapter 1920. Insult. Xianxia chuckled and said, "Little big brother, she didn't insult you because she can see through your nature. Your nature is lustful, that's why she said that." Yi Xian was speechless. Shin Qin looked at Yi Xian with an unfriendly expression. "Do you know what you've done?" Yi Xian said solemnly, "I'm just passing by." Shin Qin pointed at Xianxia, a little angry. "Do you know who she is?" Yi Xian glanced at Xianxia and shook his head. "I don't know." Shin Qin glared at Yi Xian. "You're in big trouble." Yi Xian was speechless. "I didn't King do anything. Did he cause trouble again?" At this time the divine quilt looked at Xianxia. "What do you want to do?" Xianxia blinked. "You've trapped me for so long and now I'm out. You ask me what I want to do. Shin Qin, can you not ask such an idiotic question? You'll make me despise you." Shin Qin looked at Xianxia and didn't say anything. However, the temperature was dropping at a terrifying rate. Xianxia, on the other hand, looked calm with a faint smile on her face. At the side, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Big shots, I'm just passing by. Go ahead." With that he turned around and left. Meanwhile, the divine quilt suddenly said, "You can't leave." Yi Xian looked at the divine quilt. "Why?" However, Shin Qin did not say anything. Xianxia laughed and said, "Little brother, she wants to use the mysterious space-time in your body to seal me. You're not going to help him, are you?" As she spoke, she smiled faintly. Her smile was a little horrifying. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "I'm really not interested in interfering in the enmity between seniors. I'm just passing by." At this time Xiao Ta suddenly said, "Young lord, when did you become such a coward?" Yi Xian's face darkened. "Do you think I'm like you? Big brother, even if you want to be arrogant you have to look at your partner, okay?" Xiao Ta said calmly, "Under 3 swords, who do we need to be afraid of?" Yi Xian had a headache. He really wanted to give this Xiao Ta a stab. Ever since he was transformed, this Xiao Ta didn't even put his father in his eyes. If this went on, something would happen sooner or later. Meanwhile, Xianxia smiled and said, "Big brother, they won't let you off because you have a mysterious space within you. They'll definitely think of a way to obtain it and use it against me." Yi Xian looked at Xianxia. "What about you? You can kill me now and obtain the mysterious spacetime in my body, can't you?" Xianxia rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. "I'm not that bad." Shin Qin spoke indifferently. "The reason she hasn't attacked is because she doesn't know your origins. But I believe that she definitely won't let you go because once she obtains the mysterious spacetime in your body, her strength will undergo an earth-shaking change." Xianxia glared at the divine quilt. "Don't try to sow discord between us." Yi Xian was silent. He felt like he'd been swept into a huge vortex. Shin Qin intended to say something, but Xianxia suddenly smiled and said, "Shin Qin, let's stop reminiscing for today. We'll catch up another day." As she spoke, she waved her right hand. Bang! Shin Qin's image was instantly obliterated. Xianxia gazed at Yi Xian and smiled. "Let's go." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then he said, "Let's go?" Xianxia blinked. "We're on the same side now." Yi Xian was speechless. Xianxia smiled. Don't worry, I won't hurt you. Yi Xian asked, Miss Xiongho, are you from the divine Dao nation? Xiongho took the candied fruit in Yi Xian's hand and then she said, no. However, I know a little about the divine Dao nation you speak of, Dao Yi. The one who founded the divine Dao nation is called Shen Dao Ming, right? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't know. All I know is that the world calls him the divine emperor. Xiongho smiled, then it should be that guy. Yi Xian said solemnly, Miss Xiongho knows the divine emperor? Xiongho nodded. He comes from the same place as me and that Shenqin. He's an extraordinary person. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. Do you have enmity with him? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then he said, I almost do. If Qing really destroyed the divine Dao nation with a single sword strike, then it would be a great enmity. Of course he didn't panic. If he had the guts then he would go look for Qing. Xiongho sized up Yi Xian and then she said, the mysterious space-time within your body. Yi Xian smiled. You want it? Xiongho blinked. Are you willing to give it to me? Yi Xian looked straight at Xiongho. If I don't give it to you, will you take it from me? Xiongho looked at Yi Xian for a moment and then she grinned. No. Yi Xian smiled. Then I won't give it to you. Xiongho smiled and then she said, let's go. As she spoke, she walked into the distance. When Yi Xian and Xiongho walked out of the Shao Dao, Xiongho turned to look and in an instant the small hall behind her directly burst into flames. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's expression changed. Even the 10th and 11th spacetime were burning. Xiongho turned to look at Yi Xian. Let's go. As she spoke, she and Yi Xian left this strange spacetime. As soon as they left, the two saw the heavenly abyss holy lady, and beside her stood a man. Xiongho looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, your friend? Yi Xian shook his head. Xiongho smiled slightly and didn't speak. At this moment, the man beside the heavenly abyss holy lady suddenly said, you're from the divine Dao nation? Yi Xian looked at the man. You are? The man smiled. Feng Lin. Yi Xian sized up the man, so this was the boss of the divine Dao nation in the city of Myriad Domain, Feng Lin. Feng Lin glanced at Xiongho beside Yi Xian and said with a smile, young Master Yi, this is? Yi Xian was about to speak, but Xiongho suddenly smiled and said, I'm his younger sister. Younger sister? Yi Xian was speechless. Another younger sister. Feng Lin smiled. Younger sister? Xiongho smiled. Do you have a problem? Feng Lin stared at Xiongho. Young lady should have come out from inside. Feng Lin nodded. Yes. Hearing this, Feng Lin and the heavenly abyss holy lady looked at each other. Then Feng Lin looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi is very capable. We spent more than 10 years to enter the mystic realm, but young Master Yi came today and entered it. Amazing. Yi Xian smiled. If you have something to say, just say it. Don't beat around the bush. Feng Lin smiled. Young Master Yi, since you're a straightforward person, then I'll say it directly. We want a share of the ruins. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled, then looked at Xiongho beside him. She came out from the ruins. If you want a share, then look for her. Xiongho. Feng Lin and the heavenly abyss holy lady looked at Xiongho. In fact, their real target was Xiongho, who came out from the ruins. Xiongho looked at the two of them and smiled. You want to share? Feng Lin and the heavenly abyss holy lady had a trace of wariness in their eyes. At this moment, Xiongho suddenly took a step forward, and in an instant Feng Lin and the heavenly abyss holy lady burst into flames. Their expressions changed drastically and they resisted frantically, but it was useless. At this moment, the two of them were terrified. Xiongho suddenly looked at Yi Xian and smiled. If you plead on their behalf, I can let them go. Hearing this, Feng Lin and the heavenly abyss holy lady quickly looked at Yi Xian, their eyes full of pleading. Yi Xian smiled. Lady Xiongho, whether you kill them or not is your own business. What does it have to do with me? If you want to kill them, then kill them. If you don't, then don't. Don't drag me into this. Xiongho smiled. Then I'll kill them. At this moment, Feng Lin suddenly said, Yi Xian, if I die here today, the very ones will not let you go. Faster thief. Yi Xian was in disbelief. Big brother, you have to understand that the one who killed you is this little girl. What does it have to do with me? Have you been burned senseless? Feng Lin said crazily, you can save us both. Yi Xian asked, why should I save you? Feng Lin roared, the very ones will not let you go. At this moment, the heavenly abyss holy lady suddenly said, If young Master Yi is willing to save us, the Heavenly Abyss Holy Sect will reward you handsomely. Yi Xian looked at Xiongho. This woman has a nice mouth. Let her go. Xiongho's lips curled up. I'll give you face. As she said this, she waved her right hand, and the flames on the Heavenly Abyss Holy Lady disappeared. The Heavenly Abyss Holy Lady collapsed to the ground. On the other hand, Feng Lin was dumbfounded. He wanted to say something, but Yi Xian said, I don't know the man. Feng Lin was speechless. A moment later, Feng Lin was burned into nothingness by the mysterious flames. Yi Xian looked at the Heavenly Abyss Holy Lady. At this moment, the Heavenly Abyss Holy Lady was extremely weak. It was as if her soul could disappear at any moment. The Heavenly Abyss Holy Lady looked at Yi Xian and said weakly, Thank you. Yi Xian smiled. You said you would give me benefits. The Heavenly Abyss Holy Lady nodded. I will. Yi Xian smiled. I'll be waiting. As he said this, he looked at Xiongho. Miss Xiongho, where are you going? Xiongho licked her sugar-coated haws, then said, I'll go wherever you go. Yi Xian's face darkened. What do you mean? Xiongho smiled and said, It's exactly what it means. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Miss Xiongho, you're free now. If you want revenge, go find that divine quilt. Why are you following me? Xiongho smiled. I've been sealed for too long. I need to heal now. Yi Xian's face darkened. If you need to heal, then why are you following me? I can't heal you. Xiongho licked her sugar-coated haws and smiled. Why don't you want me to follow you? I can help you fight. Yi Xian said in a low voice. Miss Xiongho, I've already said it. I don't want to get involved in the matter between you and that divine quilt. Now that you're free, you can go do what you need to do, alright? Xiongho looked at Yi Xian and smiled. I won't. I want to follow you. Yi Xian was silent. He was a little angry. He really wanted to kill this guy with a sword. At this time, Xiao Ta suddenly said, Young master, this woman is really arrogant. But it's okay, after we get out, let her use the green profound sword to sense Sister Tianming, then she'll behave. My sister Tianming specializes in all kinds of arrogant people. Yi Xian. Chapter 1921. Yi Xian couldn't do anything about this Xiongho's entanglement, who asked him to be unable to defeat it. At this moment, the Heavenly Abyss Saintess recovered a little. She looked at Yi Xian and said, Thank you, young Master Yi, for saving my life. Yi Xian said with smile, Saintess, I am looking forward to the benefits you are going to give me. The Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden hesitated for a moment, then said, Young Master Yi, can you follow me to the Heavenly Abyss Divine Sect? Yi Xian frowned. Tianyuan's Sacred Sect? The Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden nodded. Yi Xian turned to look at Xiongho. Xiongho giggled, Whatever you say. Yi Xian thought about it and said, Then let's go to the Tianyuan Divine Sect. Xiongho glanced at the Heaven Abyss Holy Maiden and Yi Xian, and an almost undetectable smile appeared on her face. Moments later, Yi Xian and Xiongho followed the Heavenly Abyss Saintess to the Heavenly Abyss Sacred Sect. He had gained a lot from this trip to the mystic realm. Now, after fusing with the mysterious spacetime, he could persist for an hour. Not only that, but he could also throw the tower 3 times in a short period of time. The only pity was that he still couldn't use the spacetime pressure of the mysterious spacetime. If he could use the spacetime pressure of the mysterious spacetime, his strength would rise to another level. There was another thing that was a pain in the ass, and that was the Xiongho. He couldn't get rid of this little girl now, and he knew that there would be big trouble soon. Divine Dao Nation. Inside the palace, Musa walked to the front of the Divine Dao plume and bowed slightly. Feng Lin is dead. Divine Dao Ling frowned slightly. It couldn't have been that guy who killed him, right? Feng Lin told us that he was killed by Yi Xian. However, according to the information we received, he was killed by someone else. Musa said in a deep voice. Divine Dao Ling was perplexed. Then why did Feng Lin send a message back saying that young Master Yi killed him? Musa shook his head. I don't know. The Divine Dao Ling's expression darkened. You're still trying to scam me even after you're dead. What's wrong with him? Musa said, Your Majesty, we have received news that the very ones are looking for young Master Yi. The Divine Dao Ling immediately got up and left. Musa was stunned, and then he said, Your Majesty, where are you going? The Divine Dao Plume didn't even turn its head. Musa still wanted to say something, but in the next moment his expression changed drastically because he noticed that there were 12 people following behind the divine Dao feather. These 12 people were all dressed in white armor and had golden sabers at their waists. Divine Dao army. Musa was a little dumbfounded. Why was he mobilizing the divine Dao army? Not long after Yi Xian's group of 3 left the city of infinite domains, the space in front of them suddenly trembled violently. Then a powerful aura swept out from the trembling space. Yi Xian was speechless. He knew it had to be the very ones. Right at this moment, the trembling space suddenly split open, and then a middle-aged man walked out from within. Yi Xian's face sank when he saw this middle-aged man. Very strong. He had definitely surpassed the life chart realm. Next to Yi Xian, the heavenly abyss holy maiden said in a low voice, Taiyan, the leader of the very ones. Taiyan looked at Yi Xian's group of 3. Finally his gaze fell on Xianxia. When he saw Xianxia, his eyes became serious. Yi Xian immediately said, the one who killed your people is this lady. If you want revenge, please do it. Xianxia rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. Little brother, you are so heartless. Yi Xian ignored Xianxia. Taiyan looked at Xianxia for a long time. After a long time he asked, what is your name? Xianxia giggled. Don't you want revenge? Why aren't you doing it? Taiyan's expression was a little ugly. He wanted revenge, but he could not see through this little girl. The very ones were not weak in the divine Dao nation, but they were not invincible. Even the very ones did not dare to say they were invincible. Moreover, this little girl had walked out of the relic. Xianxia suddenly laughed. If you don't do it, then I will. As she spoke, she opened her palm and a flame suddenly appeared in her hand. Taiyan's expression changed drastically. He suddenly stomped his right foot. In an instant the surrounding space-time seemed to collapse and pour down. Yi Xian's expression darkened. This guy is fierce. Xianxia smirked and the flame in her hand suddenly flew out. The next moment Taiyan's body began to burn. Boom. In an instant Taiyan's physical body collapsed. Taiyan was shocked. His soul wanted to escape, but the flame still wrapped around him. Just as Taiyan's soul was about to dissipate, a golden light suddenly descended from the sky and enveloped him. Under the golden light, the flame gradually disappeared. Xianxia turned to look. Not far away, a woman slowly walked over. It was the divine Dao plume. The divine Dao plume waved its right hand, and the powerful flame around Taiyan disappeared. Taiyan's expression eased up, and then he bowed slightly to the divine Dao plume. Thank you, your majesty. Yi Xian glanced at the divine Dao plume. Damn it. So this woman is strong as well. Fortunately, she courted death and went to look for Qing. Otherwise I would probably be in trouble. The divine Dao plume gazed at Yi Xian and grinned. Young Master Yi. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Ling, we meet again. Miss Ling. Taiyan's expression instantly changed when he heard Yi Xian. This fellow actually dared to address his majesty by name. To his shock, the divine Dao plume actually wasn't angry. The divine Dao plume sized up Yi Xian and then she smiled. Young Master Ye's strength has improved by quite a bit. Yi Xian smiled but didn't say anything. The divine Dao plume turned around to gaze at Xianxia. As she gazed at Xianxia, the smile in her eyes gradually turned solemn. What's your name? Xianxia smiled. You're the descendant of Shen Dao Ming. The divine Dao plume smiled. You know my ancestor. Xianxia nodded. I do. Your ancestor isn't bad. As for you. As she spoke, she sized up the divine Dao plume and smiled. You're barely passable. The divine Dao plume grinned. Senior, this is a misunderstanding. Can we just let it go? Xianxia turned to look at Yi Xian. I'll give him face. Yi Xian was speechless. This fellow dragged me into this again. The divine Dao plume turned to look at Yi Xian and grinned. Young Master Yi, please put in a good word for me. Yi Xian glanced at Taiyan. He wants to kill me. The divine Dao plume turned to look at Taiyan and the latter hurriedly said, Young Master Yi, this is a misunderstanding. I came here to meet young Master Yi. Yi Xian blinked. Meet me? Taiyan hurriedly nodded. Yes, I've long heard of young Master Ye's outstanding talent. I've admired you for a long time, so I specially came to meet young Master Yi today. Now that I've met you, it's true that hearing about you is not as good as meeting you in person. Yi Xian suddenly shook his head and smiled. You don't have to do this, sir. You just need to know who killed your ultimate tribe people. Taiyin hurriedly nodded. I already know. This has nothing to do with young Master Yi. Yi Xian smiled, then looked at the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden. Holy Maiden, we won't be going to the Heavenly Abyss Holy Sect. Let's part ways here. The Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden frowned, somewhat puzzled. Why? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled, not saying a word. At this moment Xianxia laughed. He originally wanted to bring me to the Heavenly Abyss Holy Sect and then use you to get rid of me. But now he realized that neither the Divine Dao Nation nor the Heavenly Abyss Holy Sect can get rid of me. Do you understand? The Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden glanced at Yi Xian, not saying a word. Yi Xian looked at Xianxia. Let's go. With that he turned and left. Xianxia licked her sugar-coated hawes, then followed. Seeing the two leave, Taiyin immediately heaved a heavy sigh of relief. As if thinking of something, he looked at the Divine Dao Ling. Your Majesty, who exactly is that young Master Yi? The Divine Dao Ling said plainly. Didn't you see that even that little girl didn't dare to hurt him? Taiyin smiled bitterly. The Divine Dao Ling said again, go back and heal your injuries. From now on, don't provoke this young Master Yi. Taiyin bowed slightly. Understood. With that he turned and left. The Divine Dao Ling watched Yi Xian and Xianxia disappear in the distance, a hint of worry flashing in his eyes. Yi Xian brought Xianxia back to the Women's Academy, then he brought Xianxia to Miss Ding. Yi Xian looked at Xianxia. Talk to Miss Ding. With that he turned and left. Xianxia looked at Miss Ding and licked her sugar-coated hawes, not saying a word. Miss Ding said with a smile. He has that mysterious space-time on him. You want it but are afraid. What are you afraid of? They were afraid of his background. If I'm not wrong, you want to find out more about him now. Once you find out more about him and he doesn't pose much of a threat to you, you will not hesitate to kill him, right? Xianxia smiled and said, you're right. Miss Ding smiled and did not say anything else. Xianxia blinked. Aren't you worried? Miss Ding said with a smile. What should I be worried about? Xianxia looked at Miss Ding. Aren't you worried that I'll really kill him? Miss Ding patted Xianxia's shoulder lightly. All his enemies are toys that his sister left for him. With that she turned and left. Xianxia suddenly asked, is his sister very strong? Miss Ding did not turn her head. Not very strong. You can meet her in the future if you have the chance. Xianxia licked her sugar-coated hawes and said with a smile, I look forward to it. In the distance Miss Ding shook her head with a smile and did not say anything else. No one wanted to meet that woman. Of course that was except for Yi Xian. After Yi Xian entered Xiaota, he started to use the Azure Profound Sword to fuse with that mysterious spacetime. After returning, Miss Ding returned the Azure Profound Sword to him. With the Azure Profound Sword he was confident that he could unleash the power of that mysterious spacetime. While Yi Xian was cultivating, Xianxia did not leave the women's college. Instead she wandered around the women's college. 1 month later. In the Divine Dao Nation's palace, Musa suddenly entered the palace. He quickly walked to the Divine Dao Ling and bowed respectfully. Your Majesty, something big has happened. The Divine Dao Ling put down the ancient book in his hand. What is it? Musa's expression was somewhat grave. I just received news that a group of mysterious experts suddenly entered our Divine Dao Nation and headed straight for the women's college. Divine Dao Ling frowned. Who is it? Musa shook his head. I don't know. The Divine Dao Plume fell silent. Could their target be young Master Yi? Musa asked solemnly. The Divine Dao Plume immediately said, he can't die. At least not in my Divine Dao Nation. Musa was confused. Why? The Divine Dao Ling said softly, if he dies in my Divine Dao Nation, my Divine Dao Nation will be buried with him. Understand? Musa. P.S. It's too inconvenient to pay New Year's greetings at home. Where could he go? Without a car he had to wait for a bus for an hour and a half. It was too scary. Chapter 1922. In a small courtyard in the Women's Academy, Miss Ding, who was reading, suddenly raised her head and then she frowned. A woman was flying over from afar and there were 6 black-robed figures behind her. The woman in the lead was Xianxia. Meanwhile Yi Xian appeared by Miss Ding's side, and his face fell when he saw Xianxia. He came so quickly. Xianxia appeared here as well and then she glanced at Xianxia and grinned. Xianxia, you're a little too fast. Xianxia glanced at Xianxia and then her gaze descended onto Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, we meet again. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Xinqin, we won't interfere in the matters between the two of you. Xinqin shook her head. It was you who let her go. Yi Xian was slightly helpless. I didn't do it on purpose. Xinqin gazed at Yi Xian. We want to ask young Master Yi for a favor. Yi Xian frowned when he heard this. Xinqin asked, Is young Master Yi unwilling? Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. Let me tell you, my Aunt Ding is here, so don't threaten me. As he spoke, he moved behind Miss Ding. His father might not care about him, but he would definitely care about Aunt Ding. Miss Ding shook her head and smiled when she heard Yi Xian. This fellow is really like a child. Xinqin gazed at Miss Ding. We want to ask young Master Yi for a favor, is that all right? Miss Ding shook her head. No. Xinqin's eyes narrowed slightly. Then I won't hold back. As she spoke, she opened her palm and was about to attack. Meanwhile, Miss Ding suddenly said, Isn't your target Miss Xiongho? Xiongho laughed. Actually, her main target isn't me but young brother Yi. So long as she obtains that mysterious space, then she can easily seal me. Conversely, if young brother Yi helps me, then she can never seal me. Yi Xian hurriedly said, Then you deal with her. Xiongho rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. She has 7 people and I'm alone. I can't beat them. Unless you help me. Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, the divine quilt in the sky suddenly made a move. She pressed down lightly with her right hand. Boom. The entire space began to boil. Down below, Lady Ding smiled faintly. She opened her palm and a ray of sword light suddenly soared into the sky. Boom. Before everyone could recover from their shock, the divine quilt was blasted a few tens of thousands of meters away, and when it finally stopped, its physical body had completely vanished. Only its soul remained, and its soul was extremely weak. Everyone was dumbfounded by this scene. Xiongho's expression changed as well. She stared at Miss Ding and said nothing. At this moment, Lady Ding opened her palm, and the sword light returned to her hand before disappearing. Yi Xian glanced at Miss Ding. Just as he had guessed, his father did leave something for Aunt Ding to save her life. In the distance, the divine quilt looked at Miss Ding in disbelief. You, Miss Ding smiled. Leave the women's academy. I'll only say this once. The divine quilt glanced at Miss Ding before retreating with the 6 people behind her. Yi Xian looked at Xiongho. He's seriously injured now. Aren't you going to deal with her? Xiongho rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. Don't you see that there are 6 people behind her? Yi Xian said in a low voice. But she's seriously injured now. This is a good opportunity for you to kill her. Xiongho blinked. Why don't we join forces? Yi Xian pursed his lips and turned to leave. Xiongho licked her candied fruit, then looked at Miss Ding. That sword light wasn't yours. Please continue to the next page. Miss Ding smiled. It really wasn't mine. Xiongho hurriedly asked, Whose was it? Miss Ding smiled. I'm not telling you. With that, she turned to leave. Xiongho remained silent. Outside the women's academy, the divine quilt stopped with the 6 people. At this moment, all 7 of them had extremely grave expressions. Especially the divine quilt in the lead. She was almost insta-killed by that sword light. Whose sword light was that? Right at this moment, an old man behind her frowned and turned to look. Not far away, a woman walked out. It was the divine quilt. The divine quilt looked at the divine quilt. Who are you? The divine quilt frowned. And who are you? The divine quilt smiled. You're asking me who I am in my territory? The divine quilt said, You're the ruler of the divine Dao nation. The divine quilt smiled. Yes. The divine quilt was expressionless. This matter has nothing to do with your divine Dao nation. The divine quilt smiled. Understood. With that, she turned to leave. After the divine quilt left, an old man beside the divine quilt said, This woman is not simple. There were many mysterious and powerful auras in the surroundings just now. The divine quilt's expression was calm. Her ancestor was a great figure. The old man said, Divine daughter, what should we do next? It'll be extremely disadvantageous to us if that young man helps Xiongho. The divine quilt shook her head and sighed in silence. A short while later, the divine quilt said, We can't allow that young man to help Xiongho. However, that young man is hostile towards us now, so it will only backfire if I go. The old man said in a low voice, Then what should we do next? The divine quilt fell silent for a moment before she said, "That young man possesses a mysterious space that can suppress numerous special types of space. What do you think the Tendo sect will do if they find out?" The old man hesitated for a moment before he said, "Divine daughter, you mean that we should get someone else to do the dirty work?" The divine quilt nodded. "Go back and do it." The old man bowed slightly. "Understood." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. The divine quilt closed her eyes slowly. If she was given another chance, she would try using a soft approach. Unfortunately, they were enemies now, so it was useless even if she tried using a soft approach. On the other side, the divine quilt arrived at Miss Ding's courtyard and she smiled upon seeing her. "Miss Ding, please don't hold back if you need my divine Dao Nation's help." Miss Ding smiled. "Thank you." The divine quilt spoke in a low voice. "Those people aren't simple at all." Miss Ding smiled. "It's fine. Miss Ling doesn't have to worry about it. We'll deal with it ourselves." The divine quilt smiled. "Understood." She stood up and left as she spoke. Miss Ding remained silent after the divine quilt left, and then she stood up and left after a short while. Within a room, Zhou Xian sat cross-legged on the ground while the space around him gradually warped. A mysterious space. After he relied on Xiaota, he was able to fuse with this mysterious space. Now he was going to utilize the green profound sword to utilize this mysterious space. Zhou Xian opened his palm and the green profound sword appeared within it. He waved it lightly and the space before him instantly became illusory. Zhou Xian instantly became excited. It really was possible. He was able to exert a little bit of spatial pressure through the green profound sword just now. Zhou Xian gazed at the green profound sword in his hand and sighed with emotion. This green profound sword really is quite terrifying, and it seems like there's no space that it can't control. This chapter isn't over. Please continue to the next page. Zhou Xian didn't think too much about it and he continued. After that, Zhou Xian cultivated like a madman every single day. In his opinion, this was the best time to cultivate because he had Aunt Ding's protection. Xianxia sat cross-legged in a courtyard, and her entire body was covered in flames. Healing. Around 2 hours later, Xianxia slowly opened her eyes. At this moment, her injuries were completely healed. Meanwhile, a figure appeared behind Xianxia and it slowly knelt down. "Leader. That goddess is heavily injured, so why don't we just kill her?" Xianxia glanced at the figure. "Idiot. Who'll deal with that young brother Yi if we kill her?" The figure hesitated for a moment before it said, "Leader, that young man is as weak as a chicken. Not to mention you, even I can kill him with ease." "Leader, why?" "Shut up." Xianxia glanced coldly at the figure. "You idiot. Can't you see that our young brother Yi has backing?" The figure puckered his lips. "Leader is invincible." Xianxia shook her head and sighed. "Hurry up and go back. Call your immortal over. I'm so scared with your stupid teammate here." The figure was speechless. After the figure left, Xianxia slowly closed her eyes. Actually, she had a headache as well. She'd wanted to do it for a long time, but she'd endured it in the end. Because she couldn't see through the mysterious space-time, and it was precisely because she couldn't see through it that she had some misgivings. As it turned out, her misgivings were right. She wasn't confident in being able to withstand the mysterious sword light in Miss Ding's hand. A moment later, Xianxia stood up and left. A month later, Zhou Xian was able to utilize the space-time pressure of the mysterious space-time. Now, killing a life-soul realm expert was like killing a chicken to him. Moreover, he was able to suppress all space-time after fusing with the mysterious space-time, including the 9th, 10th, and even the 11th space-time. These space-times couldn't withstand his mysterious space-time at all. Even he himself didn't know what level of strength he possessed. On this day, Zhou Xian found Xianxia. Seeing that Zhou Xian had taken the initiative to look for her, Xianxia was a little surprised. "Little brother Yi, why are you looking for me?" Zhou Xian smiled. "I want to spar with you." Xianxia blinked. "Spar with me?" Zhou Xian nodded. "Yes." Xianxia shook her head and smiled. "Little brother Yi, I know that your mysterious space-time is very powerful, but as far as I know, you don't seem to be able to control it. Even if you can control it, you won't be my match. Because your level is too low." Zhou Xian smiled. "It's okay, I'm just trying." Xianxia nodded. "Then make your move." Zhou Xian opened his palm and the azure profound sword appeared in his hand. The next moment he slashed down with the sword. As the sword slashed down, the spacetime in front of him shattered and annihilated. Xianxia narrowed her eyes and punched out. Boom. Yixian was blasted into the 10th layer of spacetime. At the same time, the entire 10th layer of spacetime started burning and turned into a hell of fire. However, Xianxia was also slashed into the abyss of the 10th layer of spacetime by Yixian's sword. However, the abyss of spacetime could not do anything to her. At this moment, Xianxia's expression became solemn. However, the corner of Yixian's mouth curled up into a smile. Just now he didn't use the spacetime pressure of the mysterious spacetime. That sword was the same as when he threw Xiaota. Now he had a rough idea of his own combat strength. If he used the spacetime pressure of the mysterious spacetime, he could fight with Xianxia. End of this chapter. Chapter 1923. Xianxia glanced at Yixian, her heart incomparably shocked. This youth actually slashed her into the spacetime abyss. One had to know that Yixian was merely at the seamless realm, while she was several realms higher than Yixian. Mysterious spacetime. Xianxia glanced at Yixian. She knew that it was the mysterious spacetime power. What kind of spacetime was that? Xianxia was getting more and more curious. Meanwhile, Yixian suddenly said, "Miss Fierce Ho, I'll seek guidance from you another day." With that he turned around and left. At this time Xianxia suddenly said, "Can you let me feel that mysterious spacetime?" Yixian turned to look at Xianxia and said with a smile, "There's no other way." Xianxia frowned. "Is there no other way?" Yixian nodded. "There's no other way." He was not lying. There was only one way to feel the mysterious spacetime, and that was to fuse with Xiaota. Of course he would not allow Xiaota to merge with this woman. Xianxia licked the sugar-coated haws without saying anything. Yixian smiled. "Miss Xianxia, can you tell me more about this realm?" Xianxia asked. "What realm?" Yixian said, "The realm above life spirit." Xianxia said, "Above the life soul is the life god, which is also the life providence, life body and life soul. Once they are all mastered, they will be the life god." Yixian said in a deep voice, "Is there any difference between a life god and a life soul?" Xianxia smiled and said, "The first step is to condense a fate matrix, then a life body and finally a life soul. After all three are successfully condensed, if they can be perfectly fused again, they can reach the life god level. Once you become a life god, it will be very difficult for you to die." As she spoke, she looked at Yixian. "Just like how you threw me into the spacetime abyss, the spacetime abyss can no longer hurt me." Yixian asked in a deep voice, "Miss Fierce Ho, are you a fate god?" Xianxia shook her head and smiled. "I'm a void life realm above life god." Yixian frowned. "Ethereal life? What does it have to do with my life?" Xianxia laughed. "Up until now, no one has been able to escape the grasp of fate. Aside from eternal life, the ultimate goal of any living being that cultivates is to escape the control of fate." Yixian said solemnly, "No one can escape the grasp of fate?" Xianxia nodded. "For now, no." Yixian was a little curious. "Who created these realms?" Ferocious Ho was silent. Yixian laughed. "You don't know either?" Xianxia said, "The creator of the life god realm is Zhou Xian, an exalted immortal. Among countless youths, the highest realm was the life spirit realm, and Zhou Xian opened up a new realm based on this foundation, which was the life god realm. The so-called life god realm has a special characteristic. First, it's very hard to injure it with normal power. For example, even the terrifying power in the spacetime abyss can't hurt a life god realm cultivator." Yixian asked again, "What about those above life god?" Xianxia said, "Essence soul realm." Yixian frowned slightly. "Essence soul realm?" Xianxia laughed. "Yes." As she spoke, she opened her palm, and there was a small golden person in her palm. This small golden person looked exactly like her. Yixian was a little curious. "What is this?" Xianxia said, "This is the Essence Soul realm. Those who reach the Essence Soul realm can cultivate the Essence Soul, and this Essence Soul is equivalent to a second life." Yixian frowned slightly. "Second life?" Xianxia nodded and laughed. "It's not just a second life. This Essence Soul has many other benefits. You will know when you reach the Essence Soul realm. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page." "Yes." Yixian said solemnly, "You are at the Essence Soul realm." Xianxia laughed. "Yes. This Essence Soul realm was created by a genius who cultivated painstakingly. The life god realm had been a bottleneck for nearly 1,000,000 years until the appearance of this painstakingly cultivation. He opened up a new realm based on the life god realm, which is the essence soul realm. When she spoke up to this point, she smiled and said, "Those who established a realm are also called pioneers, and every single one of them is worthy of our respect." Xian was a little curious. "What is the highest realm now?" Xianxia glanced at Xian. "What are you asking about?" Xian said, "I'm curious." Xianxia laughed. "Above the essence soul realm is life knowledge. This realm has a particularly terrifying feature, and that is they can foresee their own death." Xian was struck dumb. Then he said, "You can predict your own death?" Xianxia nodded. "This kind of expert is very terrifying because they can foresee danger. Apart from that, some of their methods can also be described as unfathomable." Xian asked again, "What about above the life knowledge realm?" Xianxia smiled and said, "For now the life-knowing realm is the limit. In a faraway place, many life-knowing realm experts are opening up a new realm. Whoever can open up a new realm will have his name spread through the ages." Xian nodded. "I understand." Xianxia said, "I've never seen the mysterious space inside your body. Is the person behind you at the life knowledge realm?" Xian said with a smile, "Guess." Xianxia curled her lips. "In any case, the highest he can go is no higher than the life knowledge realm." Xian laughed and said nothing more. He turned and left. Life knowledge? He knew that Qing'er's realm was definitely higher than the life knowledge realm. However, he didn't know what realm Qing'er had reached. From the beginning, no matter how much he improved, he felt that Qing'er was unfathomable. Realm? Qing'er had jumped out of the so-called realm. Behind him, Xianxia glanced at Xian and frowned. Could he really be at the life knowledge realm? Xian returned to his room and sat cross-legged on the floor. He opened his palm and the Qingxian sword appeared in his hand. With his current strength, he could fight a primordial soul realm powerhouse. However, he was not confident that he could win. Moreover, primordial spirit experts had 2 lives. After a long silence, Xian tried to get in touch with the mysterious space-time abyss. After reaching the life god realm, one could ignore the space-time abyss. A normal space-time abyss was no threat to a powerhouse like Xianxia, but what about this mysterious space-time abyss? In the following time, Xian began to get in touch with the mysterious space-time abyss. His goal now was to understand the space-time abyss thoroughly. On this day, a middle-aged man arrived above the women's college. Behind him were 2 old men. The middle-aged man looked down at the women's college and chuckled. "Mysterious space-time. Interesting." The old man on the left of the middle-aged man said in a deep voice, "Sect master, there's something fishy about this." The middle-aged man was the sect master of the Tendo sect, Mu Tianming. Mu Tianming chuckled. "Back then our Tendo sect and the Azure sect worked together to seal this Xianxia. We used more than a dozen special space-time to completely seal it. But now our special space-time was broken by that young man's mysterious space-time. This is not simple." The old man said, "As far as I know, the Divine Lady of the Azure sect has already come into contact with this young man. This chapter is not finished, please continue." Mu Tianming said, "She must have failed. That's why she leaked this information to our Tendo sect, hoping that our Tendo sect will be the vanguard." The old man said in a deep voice, "Then will sect master be the vanguard?" Mu Tianming smiled. "Depends." With that, he disappeared and reappeared in the women's college. Miss Ding, who was reading a book, raised her head to look at Mu Tianming and she felt a slight headache. "It's only been a few days, yet another enemy has arrived." Mu Tianming sized Miss Ding up and then he said, "Miss, I'm only here to meet that young man." Miss Ding smiled. "You want the mysterious space-time within him?" Mu Tianming smiled. "Yes, I want to meet him." Miss Ding thought for a moment and said, "He's cultivating right now." Mu Tianming smiled. He sized up the surroundings and said, "This place is very ordinary, but the Divine Lady and the Divine Quilt returned without accomplishing anything." As he spoke, he gazed at Miss Ding. "I heard that you possess a mysterious sword light." Miss Ding smiled. "Don't tell me you want to experience it?" Mu Tianming smiled. "Miss, do you think that sword light can protect all of you?" Miss Ding shook her head. "I have a slight headache." Mu Tianming smiled. "Miss, you're a smart person. You should know that in his hands that space-time will only harm him." Meanwhile, Yi Xian appeared by Miss Ding's side. Miss Ding smiled. I came to look for you. Yi Xian glanced at Mu Tianming and then he said, Aunt Ding, you know how difficult it is for me right now, right? There's no lack of enemies no matter where I go. Miss Ding blinked. Don't you think that all of your enemies are very retarded? Yi Xian was speechless. The smile on Mu Tianming's face vanished when he heard this. Yi Xian felt quite embarrassed as well. He glanced at Mu Tianming and said, Aunt Ding, he's still here. You have to give him some face. Miss Ding shook her head. I don't care. Just play with them yourself. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. Yi Xian hurriedly said, Don't, Aunt Ding. That fellow's cultivation is much higher than mine. You. Miss Ding turned around to look at Yi Xian and interrupted Yi Xian. If you can't even deal with a retard like that, then how can you surpass your father? I believe that you can do it. Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, Mu Tianming suddenly smiled and said, I'm retarded? Miss Ding turned around to look at Mu Tianming. Aren't you? Mu Tianming shook his head and smiled. How interesting. How truly interesting. What right does an ant like you have to look down on someone that's 10,000 times stronger than you? Just because you have a mysterious ray of sword light in your hand? Do you think that mysterious ray of sword light can protect you? How many times can you use such a consumable? You. Miss Ding suddenly smiled and said, I'm sorry, but I can use it countless times. As she spoke, she opened her palm and a ray of sword light suddenly flew out. Mu Tianming didn't even have time to react before the ray of sword light pierced through his forehead. Bang! Mu Tianming's body instantly became illusory. Mu Tianming was stunned. He'd been instantly killed. Mu Tianming gazed at Miss Ding. Whose sword light is that? Miss Ding smiled. It's my man's. P.S. Do you celebrate the new year? End of this chapter. Chapter 1924. At this moment, Mu Tianming's body was becoming more and more illusory. However, just when he was about to vanish completely, a ray of golden light suddenly flew out and vanished into the horizon. An essence spirit. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. Aunt Ding, that's his essence spirit. He's trying to escape. Aunt Ding smiled. It's fine. It's fine. Yi Xian was stunned. At this moment, Mu Tianming's essence spirit was suddenly pierced by a ray of sword light. Mu Tianming's essence spirit dissipated. He was completely dead. Miss Ding looked at Yi Xian. Come with me. With that, she turned around and left. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before following her. On the other side, Xiongho was silent for a moment before she said, How amazing. With that, she turned around and left. Shen Qin withdrew her gaze from the clouds and her expression was solemn. Mu Tianming had been instantly killed. How could they continue? After a moment of silence, she said, We can't afford to offend that woman. The old man said in a low voice, Divine daughter, what should we do now? Shen Qin's expression was slightly unsightly. Give up? She was naturally unwilling, but if they didn't give up, how could they deal with that woman? Shen Qin sighed softly. At this moment, the old man suddenly said, Yi Xian can't stay in the academy forever. Shen Qin was slightly stunned and then she said softly, That's true. As she spoke, she looked at the academy below. That woman had a life-saving sword light, but Yi Xian didn't. If Yi Xian left the academy, then it would be their chance. After a moment of silence, Shen Qin turned to look at the old man. Mu Tianming is dead and the Tendo sect won't let the matter rest. Keep an eye on their movements. The old man bowed slightly. Understood. With that, he turned around and left. Shen Qin looked down at the academy with a slightly unsightly expression. Within the academy, Miss Ding brought Yi Xian to the back of a mountain. She was silent along the way. Yi Xian felt slightly uneasy. Would Aunt Ding feel that he was too comfortable right now and want to find trouble for him? That was quite possible. At this moment, Miss Ding suddenly said, What do you plan to do next? Yi Xian said with a smile, I want to cultivate here. Glancing at Yi Xian, Miss Ding shook her head and smiled. You are taking this place as a safe haven, aren't you? Yi Xian said with a bitter smile. Aunt Ding, are you going to kick me out? Miss Ding laughed and said, I want you to go to a place to do something, are you willing? Miss Ding, I want you to do something. Are you willing? Yi Xian. Miss Ding, what? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then said, What is it? Yi Xian. Yi. Xian, yi, 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 yi. Shui. Miss Ding said solemnly, she's in a bit of trouble right now. I hope that you can help her. Ding yi yi to spirit. Ding. Ding ding, ding. Miss Ding nodded, yes. Xian hesitated for a moment and said, doesn't big sister Shui have a father? Miss Ding smiled and said, your father has gone to a very very far place. He can't care about this place for the time being. So I can only let you go. Xian thought for a moment and said, since it's big sister Shui's problem, then I'll naturally lend a hand. However, Aunt Ding, you also know that my strength is weak. I'm afraid that if I go, not only will I not be able to help sister Shui, but I will also become a burden to her. Miss Ding laughed and said, you want benefits? Xian hurriedly shook his head. If I still want benefits from helping a family, then wouldn't I be worse than an animal? Miss Ding smiled and said, your biggest weakness now is the problem of your realm. As she spoke, she pondered for a moment and said, you are now in the seamless realm. It won't be difficult for you to reach the seamless Dao. Xian quickly said, really? Miss Ding nodded, I'll help you attain the seamless realm. Xian hurriedly said, thank you Aunt Ding. Miss Ding said, come with me. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. Xian hurriedly followed her. It didn't take long for Miss Ding to bring Xian to an expanse of starry sky. She glanced at the surroundings before she gazed at Xian. You can devour sword energy to increase your cultivation, right? Xian nodded. Miss Ding opened her palm and a strand of sword energy appeared there. Xian's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene, and he hurriedly said, no. Aunt Ding, I can't devour my father's sword energy. Miss Ding smiled, why? Xian spoke in a low voice, I won't be able to endure it if the level of the sword energy is too high. Miss Ding smiled, it's fine. You can devour it slowly. Xian intended to say something else when the sword energy in Miss Ding's hand suddenly entered his body. Bang! Xian's body trembled violently. In an instant, countless strands of sword energy had actually appeared throughout his body. Xian was horrified and he hurriedly sat down cross-legged before slowly pressing down with his hands. At this moment he'd utilized the mysterious space. However, he noticed that the strand of sword energy was actually unable to suppress even the mysterious space. Damn it. My father is quite ferocious. Meanwhile, Miss Ding suddenly said, calm your mind. Xian hurriedly did as he was told, and he gradually noticed that the strand of sword energy within his body was actually dissipating by itself and allowing him to absorb it. Xian instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he sensed this scene. Under normal circumstances, he would absolutely be unable to endure this strand of sword energy from his father. Fortunately, he had Aunt Ding's help. Just like that, with Miss Ding's help, Xian started to devour the strand of sword energy bit by bit, and the aura he emanated gradually grew stronger and stronger. On the other side, Xianxia sat cross-legged in her room with her eyes slightly closed. Her entire body was emitting a blood-red flame. After an unknown period of time, Xianxia slowly opened her eyes, and the flames around her suddenly surged. However, as she pressed down with her right hand, the flames around her instantly vanished. At this moment, a woman suddenly appeared behind her. The woman bowed respectfully. Greetings, Lord Xiong. Xianxia said indifferently, how is it? Wuxia said, Lord Xiong, I found him. After saying that, she placed a black scroll in front of Xianxia. Xianxia opened it and after a long time she frowned slightly. A woman in a plain dress? Wuxia nodded. There are two people behind that young Master Yi. One is that woman in a plain dress, and the sword in his hand seems to have been forged by this woman. Apart from this woman in a plain dress, there's also a man in a green shirt. The man in green shirt seems to be young Master Ye's father. Xianxia said, do you have detailed information on these two people? Wuxia shook her head, I can't find them. Xian frowned slightly, you can't find them? Wuxia nodded, these two people are extremely mysterious. Among them, the woman in the plain dress who appears the most in the eyes of the world is also very mysterious. I only know that she only uses one sword to kill people. Xianxia frowned slightly, one sword? Wuxia nodded slightly, one sword. Xianxia's lips curled up slightly, killing people with one sword interesting. Wuxia said solemnly, Lord Xiong, this young man's background is extremely mysterious, especially the sword in his hand. It can actually ignore any space-time pressure and space-time abyss. Apart from that, his bloodline is also extremely special. As of now, this subordinate has never seen a bloodline that is more powerful than his. Xiongho was silent. Zhou Xian said again, Lord Xiong, there's one more thing. This women's academy's dean is extremely not simple. We can't underestimate him. Xiongho asked, what do you mean? Zhou Xian said solemnly. His background is also very mysterious and he's extremely powerful. As for how strong he is, I haven't found out yet. However, we can't underestimate him. Xiongho was silent for a long time, then said, in that case, this little brother Yi has a group of terrifying people behind him. However, logically speaking, with such a powerful background, it shouldn't be unknown. Zhou Xian nodded, yes. Xiongho laughed, it's getting more and more interesting. Zhou Xian retreated to the side and did not speak anymore. After a while, Xiongho suddenly laughed. Zhou Xian, do you think it's possible that the plain-dressed woman and the green-robed man have surpassed the life-knowing realm? Zhou Xian shook her head. Absolutely impossible. If the two of them had surpassed the life-knowing realm, they would have long been famous. But the fact is, we haven't even heard of them. Speaking up to here, she paused and said, at most life-knowing realm. At most life-knowing realm. That was already a very high estimate. One must know that in this world, life-knowing realm was as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. At this moment, the space in front of Zhou Xian suddenly trembled. After a while, Zhou Xian looked at Xiongho. Lord Xiong, that young Master Yi has come out of seclusion. And now he has reached the seamless Dao. Xiongho frowned slightly. He has reached the seamless Dao? Zhou Xian nodded. Not only that, but he has also left the women's academy. Xiongho immediately stood up. He has left the women's academy? Zhou Xian nodded, yes. Xiongho said, follow him in secret. Don't show yourself. With that, she suddenly vanished. As for Zhou Xian, she also quietly disappeared. Somewhere in the clouds, an old man appeared behind Xianxia, and the old man said in a low voice, Goddess, I just received news that young Master Yi has left the women's academy. Xianxia opened her eyes. He has left the academy? The old man nodded, yes. Xianxia said, did Miss Ding follow him? The old man shook his head, no. Xianxia frowned slightly. He actually didn't follow. Isn't he afraid of death? The old man said, Lord Xiong has also left the women's academy. Xianxia said in a low voice, that damned woman can really endure. She actually hasn't made a move yet. The old man hesitated and said, I'm afraid she wants us to make the first move. Xianxia nodded. That woman is extremely vicious. Inform the sect of Tendo that Yi Xian has left the women's academy. In any case, she wouldn't make the first move. The old man nodded. Understood. With that, he turned and left. Within the women's academy, Miss Ding looked up at the strand of sword light that had vanished in the horizon, and she said softly, I've finally sent that troublesome fellow away. Little fellow, take care on your journey. Chapter 1925. Not long after Yi Xian left the women's college, Xiongho appeared behind him. Xiongho rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. Brother Yi, why didn't you inform me when you were leaving? That's not good enough. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Xiongho, you really want to rely on me? Xiongho giggled. I like to follow you. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, Miss Xiongho, I have a suggestion. Xiongho glanced at Yi Xian. What suggestion? Yi Xian said seriously, your main target is my mysterious spacetime. You don't want to be my enemy. Am I right? Xiongho nodded. Yes. But you are not willing to give it to me. Yi Xian said with a smile. We can cooperate. Xiongho frowned. Cooperation? Yi Xian nodded. Cooperation. Xiongho said solemnly. How? Yi Xian smiled. I will share the mysterious time and space with you and you will give me benefits. Xiongho looked at Yi Xian. What benefits? Yi Xian shrugged. I don't care, it depends on what you give me. Xiongho smiled. You are so cunning. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Xiongho, what do you think of my suggestion? Xiongho was silent for a moment. What do you want? Yi Xian asked. What can you give me? Xiongho said. I can give you a lot of women. Yi Xian said subconsciously. How many? Speaking of this, he seemed to think of something and flew into a rage. Miss Xiongho, please don't insult my character. I Yi Xian am not interested in women. Xiongho curled her lips. I don't believe you. Yi Xian, Xiongho said. I also have a suggestion, listen to it. Your mysterious space-time is very precious, and I don't have any divine items of equal value to exchange with you. So what I mean is, you lend it to me for research and I will help you fight and help you advance to the life-soul realm or even the life-god realm. Of course, it is also possible to advance to the primordial soul realm. After all, your talent is extremely good, the best I've ever seen. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. You're really good at bluffing. After speaking, he increased his speed and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. Xiongho hurriedly followed. Xiongho walked to Yi Xian. Then you can tell me your conditions. Yi Xian smiled and said, Miss Xiongho, do you know about the extreme heaven realm? Xiongho frowned slightly. Are you going to the ultimate heaven realm? Yi Xian nodded. Xiongho's expression became a little strange. Yi Xian asked, What's wrong? Xiongho said in a low voice, Do you know what that place is? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't know. Xiongho shook her head. I advise you not to go. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Xiongho said calmly, It's a very chaotic place. How chaotic is it? Let me put it this way, you will see the darkest side of human nature there. Moreover, there are a lot of powerhouses there because there are divine crystals there, a kind of divine item that can make people reach the knowing realm after swallowing it. Of course, it requires a lot, so some top powerhouses struggle there every day trying to save enough divine crystals to reach the knowing realm. Yi Xian was speechless. Why did Sister Shui go there? Xiongho licked her candied fruit and said, With your current strength going there. Saying that, she shook her head. Yi Xian was speechless. Xiongho continued, Moreover, you have a bunch of divine items, whether it is your sword, your tower, or the mysterious spacetime, they all have a fatal attraction to the monsters there. If you go there, you will be like a sheep entering a pack of wolves. Saying that, she seemed to think of something and frowned. Why do you dare to go there? Yi Xian smiled bitterly. My sister seems to be in trouble there. Xiongho glanced at Yi Xian. I think you are not going to save people but to die. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. Miss Xiongho, with your strength, can you beat everyone there? Xiongho blinked. Of course. Yi Xian glanced at Xiongho a little doubtful. Is it true? Xiongho was a little dissatisfied. You think I am not strong? Yi Xian was silent and did not speak again. Xiongho smiled slightly and did not speak again. She wanted Yi Xian to ask for her help first so that she could take the initiative. However, she did not expect that Yi Xian did not speak. Yi Xian was a little speechless, really speechless. Before coming out, Aunt Ding told him that the extreme heaven realm was very safe and there was not much danger. On the other side, Shunqin looked at Yi Xian and Xiongho in the distance and frowned. Is this guy going to the extreme heaven realm? The extreme heaven realm. That was not an ordinary place. Even experts at her level and Xiongho's level could not be said to be absolutely safe there. As for Yi Xian, why would this guy dare to go there? Without thinking too much, she still followed. 2 hours later, Yi Xian arrived at the extreme heaven realm. As soon as he entered the extreme heaven realm, Yi Xian frowned because he smelled a pungent smell of blood. Beside Yi Xian, Xiongho pointed into the distance. Do you see that city? Yi Xian looked into the distance and saw a big city standing in the starry sky. However, this city was a little strange and there was a constant evil aura and blood aura drifting in the city. With one look, one could tell that this was not a good place. Xiongho glanced at Yi Xian. You can still make it if you leave now. Yi Xian smiled and said, Why should I leave? After saying that, he walked into the distance. After a moment of silence, Xiongho followed. Yi Xian arrived in front of the city gate. When he arrived at the city gate, his expression gradually became solemn. This city was actually dark red in color. Upon closer inspection, it was blood. This city was actually dyed red with blood. The whole city was incomparably gloomy. Beside Yi Xian, Xiongho smiled and said, Young Master Yi, I still have something to do, so I will take my leave now. After saying that, she turned and disappeared. Seeing this, Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. Damn it, this woman definitely did it on purpose. Now came the problem. Should he go in or not? Yi Xian glanced at the city and without thinking much, he walked in. As soon as he entered the city, more than 10 divine senses swept over. Each divine sense was at least at the life god realm. Sensing this scene, Yi Xian felt a headache. No matter how much his strength increased, his enemies would always be much stronger than him. When could he be like Qing'e? If he encountered an enemy, he would ask, "Where is your home?" It would be difficult. Yi Xian sighed in his heart. Now the most important thing was to find Sister Shui and leave with her. At this moment, a bloody head suddenly fell in front of Yi Xian. The head was still bleeding and obviously it had just fallen off the neck. Yi Xian was speechless. Was it really that violent? At this moment, a woman suddenly walked from the street in the distance. The woman held a sword in her hand, and there was a trace of blood on the tip of the sword. Obviously she was the one who chopped off the head. The woman wore a tight black robe, the robe tightly wrapped around her graceful body. It was extremely hot and alluring, and her appearance was also extremely beautiful, but it was extremely cold. Her eyes were like 10,000-year-old ice without a trace of emotion. Yi Xian glanced at the sword in the woman's hand and didn't speak. The woman walked over to Yi Xian and looked at Yi Xian as she opened her palm. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he took out a candied fruit and gave it to the woman. The woman stared at Yi Xian and didn't speak. At this moment the head in front of him suddenly trembled, and then a spatial ring floated out from the head and fell firmly into the woman's hand. Yi Xian was slightly embarrassed. So she didn't want something from me, so he hurriedly put the candied fruit away. At this moment there were still over a dozen divine senses on him. After the woman put the spatial ring away, she glanced at Yi Xian and then she walked over to Yi Xian. Yi Xian was about to speak, but the woman suddenly drew her sword, and it swept across Yi Xian's throat. She withdrew her sword. She turned around and left. Her movements were as smooth as flowing water. However, she suddenly stopped after taking a few steps and she turned around to look at Yi Xian. At this moment Yi Xian was completely fine, and there was no mark on his throat at all. The woman frowned slightly when she saw this. Xianxia frowned in the dark. How is this possible? The swordsman woman was a life god and she was a swordsman. Her combat strength far surpassed ordinary life gods, and she hadn't held back in that attack, but Yi Xian was completely fine. It was too strange. It wasn't just Xianxia, even some experts in the dark were puzzled. On the street, Yi Xian rubbed his throat lightly, and then he looked at the swordsman woman and smiled. That's it? The woman gazed at Yi Xian in silence for a moment, and then she suddenly charged forward. A ray of sword light flashed and she was already behind Yi Xian when the ray of light vanished, and a sword was stuck between Yi Xian's brows. The sword was swift. Right at this moment the woman suddenly frowned and she turned around to look at Yi Xian. At this moment the sword stuck between Yi Xian's brows was gradually vanishing, but Yi Xian was completely fine. The woman stared fixedly at Yi Xian as if she was trying to see through Yi Xian. At this moment the entire street was deathly silent. All the experts in the dark were dumbfounded. Xianxia's face was filled with disbelief. He's actually fine. He's fine after being stabbed in the head? Is this guy the reincarnation of the sword god? On the street in the distance, Yi Xian had completely absorbed the sword in the woman's hand. His body trembled and after a moment he greedily breathed in. This feels so good. Behind Yi Xian, the swordsman looked at Yi Xian with a trace of fear in her eyes. The first strike was just a casual one and Yi Xian was fine. She thought that Yi Xian had used some secret technique to evade her sword, and the second strike was her full strength. She did not hold back at all. Most importantly, the guy in front of her did not dodge, nor did he use any secret technique. He took her sword head-on. How did he do it? Thinking of this, the fear in the woman's eyes increased a little. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly turned to look at the swordsman. He looked at the swordsman and smiled. Since I reached destiny knowledge, no one has attacked me for 1,000,000 years. Little girl, you're the first. Destiny knowledge state. As soon as he said this, the scene instantly became silent, and the divine senses on Yi Xian's body instantly retreated like the tide. The swordsman's expression froze and her hands began to tremble. In the dark, Xianxia's eyes were wide open, and she did not even lick the candied hawthorn. Chapter 1926. Destiny Realm? The moment Yi Xian said that, the experts in the dark were dumbfounded. What kind of existence was the Destiny Realm? It was the strongest expert in the world. Moreover, these Destiny Realm experts were extremely rare even in the Extreme Heaven Realm. This was because the Extreme Heaven Realm was a group of people who wanted to reach the Destiny Realm. But now there was a Destiny Realm expert here. But didn't this guy just reach the seamless path? Was he pretending to be weak? Opposite Zhou Xian, the female swordsman's expression was extremely ugly. Did I really meet a Destiny Realm expert? At this moment Zhou Xian suddenly opened his palm and a portrait appeared in his hand. It was Sister Shue's portrait. Zhou Xian looked at the woman. Do you recognize this person? The woman looked at the portrait and hesitated for a while before saying, Senior, are you here for her? Zhou Xian nodded. Yes. The woman said in a deep voice, this woman has escaped to the dark forest. Dark forest? Zhou Xian frowned. Where is the dark forest? The woman pointed to a distance. 8,000 miles away from the city. Zhou Xian nodded. I understand. After saying that he turned around and left. At this moment the woman suddenly said, You're not going to kill me? Zhou Xian turned around and looked at the woman. I never kill women. After saying that he turned around and left. The woman looked at Zhou Xian and heaved a sigh of relief. At this moment Zhou Xian suddenly stopped in his tracks. The woman's expression suddenly changed. This guy wouldn't go back on his words, right? Zhou Xian looked at the woman. I'm not familiar with this place. Come with me. I'll give you some pointers on Sword Dao. The woman looked at Zhou Xian. She hesitated for a while before saying, Senior. Zhou Xian frowned. Why? You're not willing? The woman quickly said, I'm willing. Zhou Xian nodded. Follow me. The woman glanced at Zhou Xian and then followed him. Along the way the woman did not dare to speak. She was already traumatized by those two swords just now. In the dark, some of the experts didn't dare to follow Zhou Xian anymore. Regardless of whether this young man was in the life-knowing state or not, he was definitely not someone they could provoke. After walking for a short while Zhou Xian suddenly stopped. Not far in front of him, a man was standing there with a knife in his hand. Next to him was a bloody corpse. The corpse was still bleeding from its throat. Obviously it had just been killed. At this moment the man suddenly turned to look at Zhou Xian and the woman. When he saw Zhou Xian he frowned. Teamless Dao? As he spoke the corners of his mouth curled up into a strange smile. Zhou Xian smiled and turned to the woman. Kill her. The woman was stunned. You're not going to kill him but you want me to? Zhou Xian looked at the woman. What? Is there a problem? The woman hesitated for a moment before she said, all right. She suddenly vanished on the spot as she spoke and then a ray of light flashed. The man frowned slightly. Qiang, what's wrong with you? As he spoke he suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Bang! An expanse of light erupted from the sword and blade, and then both of them retreated explosively. The woman called Shuang was about to attack again. Meanwhile Zhou Xian suddenly said, Come try using the sword I forged. As he spoke he opened his palm and the azure sword flew over to Shuang. Shuang glanced at Zhou Xian and then she held the sword in her hand. She didn't think too much about it before she vanished on the spot. A wisp of ferocity flashed through the man's eyes. Have you gone mad? As he spoke he slashed down with his sword. Bang! An expanse of light suddenly shattered, and the man retreated explosively. This chapter isn't over. Please continue. As he retreated his body instantly shattered. It wasn't just his body, even his soul had instantly become ethereal as if it had become transparent. Shuang was stunned. As if she'd thought of something she looked down at the azure sword in her hand, her face filled with disbelief. She'd killed this guy with a single slash? After all, this man's strength was on par with hers. They'd fought each other in the past, but neither of them could do anything to the other. Yet she'd killed this guy with a single slash just now. It was because of the sword. Shuang looked at the sword in her hand, her heart filled with shock. At the same time she became slightly fearful of Zhou Xian. In the distance the man was completely stunned as well. He looked at Shuang in disbelief. Shuang didn't speak. She turned and walked over to Zhou Xian, returning the sword to Zhou Xian. Senior. Zhou Xian put the azure sword away and then glanced at the man. Everything on him belongs to you. As he spoke he walked off into the distance. Shuang hesitated for a moment before following him. At that moment the man who was about to disappear suddenly asked, Who is he? Shuang glanced at the man. This senior is at the life-knowing state. You idiot. With that she hurriedly followed Zhou Xian. Life-knowing state. The man was petrified. He'd actually attacked a life-knowing state boss just now? Soon the man completely disappeared. In the dark, Xiongho was silent. That sword was too terrifying. Especially in the hands of a swordsman at Xuang's level, the increase in combat strength would be too terrifying. Xiongho was slightly displeased because the plot was a little different from what she'd imagined. Originally, she'd thought that this guy wouldn't even be able to survive for 15 minutes after leaving with her, and then he'd ask her for help. However, she hadn't expected that this guy would actually pretend to be a life-knowing state expert. Moreover, he'd even found a bodyguard. Most importantly, that swordsman actually believed that he was at the life-knowing state. This world was too crazy. After a moment, Xiongho looked into the distance and said, "Let's see how long you can pretend for." In the distance, after Xiwang caught up to Yi Xian, she was even more respectful towards Yi Xian. This was really a boss. She had that sword from before, then she was even confident in her ability to kill an origin spirit realm expert. Meanwhile, Yi Xian spoke abruptly, "Miss Xiwang, why are the people here pursuing the person I'm looking for?" Xiwang was stunned. "Senior, you don't know?" Yi Xian shook his head. Xiwang spoke solemnly, "I thought you were doing it for the Heaven's Supreme Crystal Mine in her possession." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "A Heaven's Supreme Crystal Mine?" Xiwang nodded. "A Heaven's Supreme Crystal Mine appeared on Sky Pillar Mountain Range and many people fought for it. Unfortunately, it fell into that young lady's hands in the end. Those people naturally wouldn't let it go, so they joined forces against her. In the end, she had no choice but to flee into Dark Forest." Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. "Is Dark Forest very dangerous?" Xiwang glanced at Yi Xian. "It's naturally not dangerous to you, senior. But it's extraordinarily dangerous to us." As she spoke, she hesitated for a moment and said, "Senior, are you here to help that young lady?" Yi Xian smiled. "I'll see." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Xiwang glanced at Yi Xian once more, and then he hurriedly followed after Yi Xian. All along the way, no one came out to look for trouble with Yi Xian again. Obviously, the death of the man from before had deterred the experts in the dark. On the other hand, Yi Xian was growing more and more arrogant as he walked. He had no choice but to act arrogantly right now. He had to act well, otherwise he would become an idiot. More and more people appeared in the dark. However, none of them dared to get close to Yi Xian, nor did they dare to sweep Yi Xian with their divine sense. Obviously, they were afraid of Yi Xian. Please continue to the next page if this chapter isn't finished. Destiny Realm. Who wouldn't panic? Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings with a faint smile on his face, and he seemed calm and composed. Xiwang followed slowly behind him with a respectful expression on his face. As they were about to leave the city, Yi Xian stopped in his tracks. In front of the city gate stood an old man. The old man wore a long black robe and his hands were hidden in his sleeves. His expression was cold and gloomy. Beside Yi Xian, Xiwang said in a low voice, "Old man Xuanji is a big shot in the city. Primordial Spirit Realm." "Big shot?" Yi Xian smiled and looked at old man Xuanji. "What's the matter?" Old man Xuanji looked at Yi Xian. "Are you a Destiny Realm expert?" Yi Xian asked in return, "Do you have a problem with that?" His tone was unfriendly. Old man Xuanji said, "I wouldn't dare." Before old man Xuanji could finish speaking, Yi Xian suddenly walked slowly towards old man Xuanji. He walked very slowly and calmly as if he was taking a stroll. Seeing this, old man Xuanji's eyes narrowed, and his hands that were hidden in his sleeves slowly clenched. He was a little nervous. When Yi Xian was 10 feet away from old man Xuanji suddenly took a step forward. In an instant, Yi Xian fell directly into the abyss of 11 layers of spacetime, and countless mysterious spacetime forces surged madly towards Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian did not panic at all, and he allowed the mysterious forces to surge towards him. Very quickly, old man Xuanji's expression changed, because he noticed that Yi Xian was actually completely fine even though he was in the abyss of spacetime. Not only that, but the mysterious spacetime forces did not harm Yi Xian in the slightest. The expressions of those experts in the dark changed when they saw this scene. This was a real big shot. Old man Xuanji's expression turned extremely ugly. At this moment, even he was slightly panicking. Yi Xian walked up to old man Xuanji. He did not attack but instead opened his palm and gently guided it. In an instant, a mysterious spacetime directly enveloped old man Xuanji. Old man Xuanji's pupils constricted when he was enveloped by the mysterious space-time. This is... A wisp of disdain arose on the corners of Yi Xian's mouth. You actually dare to play with space-time in front of me? Are you joking? Old man Xuanji immediately bowed respectfully. Senior, I have offended you, please forgive me. Yi Xian laughed coldly and then he walked out of the city. Su Wang hurriedly followed him. When he saw that Yi Xian did not attack, old man Xuanji instantly heaved a heavy sigh of relief, and then he wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He was almost gone. Xianxia felt a slight headache in the dark. This old man is an primordial soul realm expert at any rate. Why is he so cowardly? Go on and kill him. She knew that the reason Yi Xian was able to disregard spacetime was entirely because of that sword, and not because of his own strength. As for that mysterious spacetime, Yi Xian was utterly unable to fully control it. Kibbe said that Yi Xian was a paper tiger. As long as this old man punched, this fellow would reveal his true colors. But this old man had been frightened. Xianxia shook her head. She really did not expect this fellow to come to this place and actually rely on a trick to survive. In the distance outside the city, Su Wang suddenly said, Senior, why don't you kill him? Yi Xian smiled faintly. Would you purposely step on an ant to death? Su Wang was stunned and then he shook his head. Yi Xian smiled. Everything in the world is like an ant. If I want to destroy it, I can destroy the heavens with one sword. As he spoke, he looked at Su Wang and smiled. For the past million years I have basically not made a move. Do you know why? Su Wang shook his head. Yi Xian smiled. I usually do not make a move, but if I do, it will not just be 1 or 2 deaths. I am afraid that if I make a move, an entire universe will be gone. Su Wang. End of this chapter. Chapter 1927. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Su Wang's expression became even more respectful. She was now convinced that Yi Xian was at the destiny-knowing stage. Even old man Profound Secrets had bowed to him, so how could it be fake? When the two disappeared into the distance, Xianxia appeared in front of the city gates. Not only her, but goddess Xianxia also appeared beside her. Xianxia glanced at Xianxia, smiled and said nothing. Xianxia was expressionless. You're just going to let him keep pretending? Xianxia hurriedly said, if you can't stand it, then go and deal with him. Xianxia was silent. She wanted to deal with Yi Xian, but she was also wary. This guy was not a kind soul. Xianxia smiled. It's fine, let him keep pretending. Let's see how long he can keep pretending. Xianxia turned to look behind her, expressionless. A bunch of fools. With that she turned and left. Xianxia shook her head. Actually, if she did not know about Yi Xian's background, she might have been fooled too. Yi Xian's azure profound sword and that mysterious spacetime really exceeded the understanding of primordial spirit realm powerhouses. It was also because of this that Yi Xian could fool old man Profound Secrets. But what puzzled her was why Yi Xian was fine after taking 2 of Su Wang's swords head-on. How did he do it? Xianxia was puzzled. Under Su Wang's guidance, Yi Xian arrived at the dark forest. Standing in front of the forest, Yi Xian fell silent. He finally knew why this place was called the Dark Forest. Because it was really dark. The forest stretched as far as the eye could see, and all the trees were pitch black as if they had been splashed with ink. Yi Xian turned to look at Su Wang. Is there anything special about this dark forest? Su Wang nodded. This place is very dangerous because there are spirits of darkness inside, an extremely special kind of being. This dark forest is their territory and they do not welcome other beings. Yi Xian looked at the dark forest in silence. He wanted to go in, but he knew that once he did he would probably be in big trouble. Beside him, Su Wang saw that Yi Xian was silent and did not say anything. After a short while Yi Xian suddenly said, Miss Hypocrisy, is there a king in this dark forest? Su Wang nodded. The king of darkness is the ruler of the dark forest. Yi Xian nodded. Understood. As he spoke he asked again, who are these people who are chasing after the woman I'm looking for? Su Wang spoke in a low voice. The most important ones are King Martial Spirit and Zhou Xian. Both of them are peak soul formation realm experts. Besides the 2 of them there are many other mysterious experts. All of them want to obtain the sky split or in that woman's possession. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. With that he walked towards the dark forest. Seeing this, Su Wang hesitated for a moment before he followed. With this senior around, what was there to be afraid of? King of Darkness? In front of a destiny-knowing expert he was like a little brother. After they stepped foot into the dark forest, Yi Xian frowned because it was extraordinarily cold and gloomy here. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly passed the green profound sword to Xiwang. Kill anyone that doesn't know what's good for them. Xiwang hurriedly nodded, and then he received the green profound sword. At the moment she held it in her hand, her bearing had changed completely. Even though she was only at the life god realm, she felt like she was invincible right now. This sword had improved her strength by more than 10 times at the very least. Right at this moment, a black tree in the distance suddenly started wriggling, and then a black figure gradually appeared before them. The figure was completely pitch black, and only its eyes emanated a ghastly blue glow. Xiwang spoke in a low voice by Yi Xian's side. The spirit of darkness, should we kill him? Yi Xian turned around to glance at Xiwang and then he said, we have to convince him with virtue first and we'll kill him if he's not convinced. Xiwang nodded. I understand. Yi Xian gazed at the spirit of darkness. I want to see your king. The spirit of darkness ridiculed. See our king? Are you even worthy? Yi Xian turned around to look at Xiwang. You can kill him now. Xiwang directly vanished on the spot. The spirit of darkness didn't even have the chance to react before it was wiped out. After he stopped, Xiwang looked at the green profound sword in his hand and he was slightly excited. This feeling was simply too awesome. It could be said that he was invincible amongst those of the same realm with this sword. Yi Xian glanced into the distance and he laughed. King of Darkness, you sure are arrogant. His voice was like thunder, and the surrounding tree of darkness trembled violently. However, there was no response. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly and he took a step forward before he said, King of Darkness, if you don't come out in 10 breaths of time, then I'll flatten your dark forest. Xiwang's blood started to boil slightly when he heard Yi Xian's words. How domineering. Following a big shot is so awesome. However, there was still no response. Breath after breath passed. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Damn it. Is this fellow really not going to come out? If he doesn't come out, then would I really have to destroy the dark forest? With my current strength, it's quite difficult to flatten the dark forest. Right when 10 breaths of time were about to end, a powerful pressure suddenly appeared here. It's here. Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. At this moment, a middle-aged man appeared not far away from Yi Xian and Xiwang. The middle-aged man was dressed a little strangely. His hair was standing up like a broom. Not only that, but his clothes were also made of leaves. He looked like a tree ant. Xiwang, who stood by Yi Xian's side, spoke in a low voice. King of Darkness. King of Darkness glanced at Yi Xian and then he said, I heard a life knower realm expert has arrived in the city. Is that you? Yi Xian smiled. This isn't a suitable place to talk. Let's go somewhere else. King of Darkness frowned slightly. Somewhere else. Yi Xian nodded. Come with me. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm and Xiao Ta appeared within it. After that, he brought Xiwang along with him and entered Xiao Ta. King of Darkness hesitated for a moment, and then he entered Xiao Ta as well. When they entered Xiao Ta, King of Darkness and Xiwang's expressions instantly changed. King of Darkness glanced at the surroundings and he felt slight disbelief. The space here is actually completely different from the outside world. Moreover, the flow of time. As he spoke up to this point, he started to speak incoherently, because this had exceeded his understanding. King of Darkness looked at Yi Xian. This? Yi Xian smiled. This is a special space that I created. It's usually used by my juniors to cultivate. King of Darkness hesitated for a moment and then he said, I admire senior's ability. Yi Xian frowned slightly. You don't know? King of Darkness was slightly embarrassed. I'm only at the nascent soul realm and I haven't come into contact with such a divine ability. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Right? But it's fine, we can take it slowly. King of Darkness hurriedly said, Senior, you're right. Yi Xian made an inviting gesture. Please take a seat. King of Darkness was slightly overwhelmed by the unexpected favor, and he hurriedly said, Senior, please. Smiling, Yi Xian said, Let's sit together. As soon as he finished speaking, he sat down. King of Darkness didn't sit and he stood instead. Yi Xian gazed at King of Darkness and King of Darkness hurriedly said, I like to stand. Yi Xian smiled. What's your name? King of Darkness replied, Mu. Senior. Yi Xian nodded. Mu Senator, I came to Dark Forest this time to look for someone. As he spoke, he opened his palm and Sister Shue's portrait appeared in his hand. You should have seen her, right? Mu Sen was slightly stunned when he saw Sister Shue's portrait. It's her? Yi Xian asked. Do you know her? Mu Sen nodded. I have. She came to Dark Forest a month ago and 2 people were chasing after her. Yi Xian gazed at Mu Sen. You didn't do anything to her, right? Mu Sen hurriedly said, No. After she entered Dark Forest, I didn't make things difficult for her. On the contrary, I made her leave. Yi Xian frowned. She left. Mu Sen nodded. She went to the wasteland. Yi Xian felt a headache coming on and he turned to look at Su Wang. Su Wang spoke in a low voice. I'm not familiar with the wasteland and I've only heard of it. As she spoke, she gazed at Mu Sen. You should be more familiar with the King of Darkness. Mu Sen spoke in a low voice. The wasteland is slightly special. It's the territory of the wasteland god, and he has an extremely strange temper. He's not easy to get along with. Yi Xian felt a headache coming on. Do I have to go to the wasteland to act cool again? He might seem fearless now, but he was actually panicking deep down. Meanwhile, Mu Sen spoke abruptly. Senior, I'm willing to take you to the wasteland. Yi Xian gazed at Mu Sen. Won't that be troublesome for you? Mu Sen grinned. It's my honor to be able to serve Senior. Yi Xian smiled. Then I'll be troubling you. As soon as he finished speaking, he led Mu Sen and Su Wang away from Xiao Ta. After leaving Xiao Ta, Mu Sen sighed with emotion. The space-time in Xiao Ta's world was really different from the space-time in reality. As if he'd thought of something, Mu Sen gazed at Yi Xian. Senior, what's the difference between the space-time in Xiao Ta's world and the space-time in the outside world? Yi Xian smiled. 10 years in there is equivalent to a day in the outside world. Mu Sen and Su Wang were dumbstruck when they heard this. 10 years in there is equivalent to a day in the outside world? At this moment, tempestuous waves were surging through their hearts. Even the word heaven-defying wasn't enough to describe such a divine treasure. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly asked, Is it very difficult? Mu Sen laughed bitterly. It's far more than difficult. Perhaps it's very simple for Senior, but it's as difficult as ascending the heavens for us. Especially the space-time in Xiao Ta's world. I've lived for so long and studied space-time for so long, but I've never seen or heard of such a space-time. Yi Xian smiled. Actually, it's not that difficult. It's just that both of you haven't come into contact with it. When he spoke up to this point, he paused for a moment before he continued. Actually, attaining the destiny realm isn't that difficult. As he spoke up to this point, he didn't continue. If he did, then his act of acting tough would be exposed. Mu Sen's expression changed drastically when he saw this. He bowed respectfully to Yi Xian and said, Please guide me, Senior. If you're able to provide me with some guidance, then I'll never forget your kindness. Yi Xian fell silent. How the fuck should I guide you? P.S. Because it's New Year, I've been going around to pay my respects, so I didn't have time to write. So the explosion on the 15th will be delayed. Everyone, please forgive me. Because I really have to pay my respects everywhere. Everyone whose home understands. Chapter 1928. Instruction. Xuang also looked at Yi Xian with excitement. Instruction from a life-knowing realm big shot. This was a rare opportunity that only appeared once in 10,000 years. While Xuang and Mu Sen were waiting expectantly, Yi Xian smiled. Then let's talk about the space-time Dao. Mu Sen hurriedly said, Please instruct us, Senior. Yi Xian looked at Mu Sen and smiled. I'll just talk about it casually. You two listen as you please. How much you can comprehend will depend on yourselves. As he spoke, he opened his palm and pressed it down lightly. In an instant, a mysterious space-time enveloped Mu Sen and Xuang. Mu Sen and Xuang's expressions changed when they were enveloped by the mysterious space-time. This was a space-time that they had never come into contact with before. Yi Xian smiled. Do you know what space-time this is? Mu Sen and Xuang shook their heads. Yi Xian thought to himself, Actually, I don't know either. Of course he couldn't say that. He smiled and said, This is called the Azure space-time, a brand new space-time that I created myself. Mu Sen was shocked. You created it, Senior? Yi Xian nodded. Of course. Mu Sen bowed slightly. Senior's methods are truly mysterious. Xuang was in awe as well and he admired Yi Xian even more. Yi Xian said with a smile, Since you are so smart, I won't say anything more. Feel it yourselves. I believe you'll gain a lot. Both of them closed their eyes slowly and sensed Yixian's mysterious space-time. Yixian looked at them and heaved a sigh of relief. Damn it. I'm going to walk the path of acting cool to the end. Not only must I act cool, I must act well. Xianxia and Xianxia looked into the distance and their expressions were not good. They realized that Musen was actually very respectful to Yixian. Obviously, Musen had been tricked by Yixian as well. Xianxia said in a low voice, "This guy is too good at tricking." Xianxia was silent. She was also a little speechless. He had never seen someone so good at bluffing. Meanwhile, Xianxia spoke in a low voice, "The King of Darkness is an idiot as well. He actually believed that this guy was in the life-knowing state. That's too stupid." Xianxia glanced at the divine quilt. "I think you are the idiot." Xianxia looked at Xianxia with an unfriendly expression. Xianxia said, "It's not that Old Man Profound and the King of Darkness are stupid, it's that he has that divine sword and that mysterious space-time. Not to mention them, even you and I might be intimidated by him if we don't know his background." The divine quilt fell silent. Xianxia continued, "Of course this guy is also good at bluffing and he's also very bold. To be honest, I do admire him a little." Xianxia glanced at Xianxia and sneered, "Admire him? Are you impressed by his ability to fool people?" Xianxia licked her sugar-coated haws and then she said, "Xianxia, if you were in the same realm of cultivation as him, then with the level of intelligence you possess, you would probably be completely toyed with by him." Xianxia was expressionless. "You and him are jackals of the same tribe." Xianxia laughed, "You're just a hypocrite." Xianxia's eyes narrowed slightly. "Let's fight?" Xianxia shrugged, "Bring it on." In next to no time the two of them started fighting. On the other side, Yixian slowly withdrew his right hand, and the mysterious space-time vanished. After a long time, Musen's eyes slowly opened and he said softly, "The Tao of space-time has no end." As he spoke he looked at Yixian and bowed slightly, "Thank you, Senior, for sharing this space-time. I've gained a lot." Yixian smiled, "It's no big deal." Musen shook his head, "It's a small matter to Senior, but it's a huge matter to me. No matter what, I, Musen, will never forget Junior's guidance today." Yixian smiled, "Then I might have to trouble you to take me to that woman I'm looking for." Musen hurriedly said, "Of course." Yixian said, "Let's go." Musen hurriedly led the way. It didn't take long for the three of them to leave the dark forest. All along the way, Musen and Shuang were extremely respectful to Yixian. Now they firmly believed that Yixian was at the destiny-knowing state. It didn't take long for the three of them to arrive at the wasteland. Yixian looked up and he couldn't see the end of the boundless wasteland. Moreover, dark gray sand drifted through the sky. Occasionally, violent winds would whistle by, and the sand would instantly cover the entire sky. Musen spoke in a low voice, "Senior, the wasteland is up ahead, the territory of the wasteland god." Yixian nodded slightly, "Ask him to come out." Musen hesitated for a moment before he said, "Senior, the wasteland god has a bad temper, so he might." Yixian suddenly smiled, "If he doesn't cooperate, then just kill him." Musen's expression changed slightly. He'd almost forgotten that this was a big shot at the destiny-knowing state. Musen didn't think too much about it and he looked up into the sky and said, "Wasteland god, come out and meet me." There was no response. Musen frowned when he saw this. Musen added, "Wasteland god." His voice rumbled like thunder, and it caused the entire wasteland to tremble violently. Suddenly, a furious shout resounded from afar, "Which bastard dares to bark in my wasteland?" Musen's face instantly darkened when he heard this. Yixian gazed at Musen, "Get him." Musen was slightly hesitant. Yixian smiled, "What are you afraid of when I'm here?" Musen smiled, "Since Senior has said that, then let's get him." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly charged forward. Bang! In an instant, the sky in the distance dimmed down, and then a powerful force swept through the wasteland like a tide. Suddenly, a furious shout resounded from the depths of the wasteland, "Musen, have you gone mad?" Rumble. The wasteland in the distance suddenly exploded apart, and then a spatial abyss appeared. Musen and the wasteland god stood facing each other within the spatial abyss. The wasteland god stared fixedly at Musen, Musin, we've always minded our own business. What's gotten into you today? Musin spoke coldly. I can't stand the sight of you, all right? As he spoke, he smashed his fist forward. Bang! The space where the wasteland god resided was instantly transformed into a spatial vortex. A wisp of a ferocious expression flashed through the wasteland god's eyes, and then he charged forward while a powerful force shot out explosively. Rumble! Countless strands of space shattered in the distant sky, and then strands of powerful force surged incessantly towards the surroundings. Yixian's eyelids twitched when he witnessed this scene, because the aftershock of the powerful force was surging towards him. How embarrassing would it be to run? I can only go head-on against it. Yixian took a step forward and activated his sword domain. Invincible sword domain. Bang! The space around Yixian and Su Wang were instantly obliterated. On the other hand, Yixian and Su Wang were completely unscathed. Su Wang gazed at Yixian with shock in his heart. As expected of a Destiny Realm expert, he was actually able to remain unmoving under such circumstances. Moreover, that sword domain from before was extremely profound, and it was obvious that it wasn't an ordinary sword domain. He's really a big shot. Yixian's face was extremely pale as he stood before Su Wang. Actually, if he were to attack, then the aftershock of the force wouldn't have been sufficient to cause him such internal injuries. However, he couldn't attack. He would definitely be exposed once he attacked. Regardless of whether it was Su Wang or Mu Xin, both of them weren't ordinary figures. So he could only resist them head-on. Fortunately, he was able to resist them even if he didn't attack. This allowed him to have a rough understanding of his own strength. His true combat strength was still a distance away from these Soul Formation Realm experts, but it wasn't a huge gap. After all, he was able to utilize the spatial pressure of that mysterious space. Right at this moment, Mu Xin and the Wasteland God suddenly stopped moving. The Wasteland God stared fixedly at Mu Xin. Mu Xin, have you gone mad? Mu Xin spoke furiously. I just can't stand the sight of you. The Wasteland God frowned slightly as if he'd thought of something, and then he turned around to look at Yixian and Su Wang. His frown deepened when he saw Yixian. The seamless path? As he spoke, he gazed at Mu Xin. Why did you bring an ant here? Mu Xin's expression changed drastically when he heard this. You're the ant. Your entire family is filled with ants. The Wasteland God frowned. What's wrong with you? Mu Xin stared fixedly at the Wasteland God. This is Senior Yixian. You actually dare to call him an ant? Wasteland God, have you lived for too long? Senior. The Wasteland God spoke in a low voice. Mu Xin, is there something wrong with your brain? You actually called an ant from the seamless path, Senior? Mu Xin glanced coldly at the Wasteland God. You really are an idiot. The Wasteland God spoke in a low voice. Mu Xin, what exactly is wrong with you? Mu Xin was about to speak when Yixian suddenly turned around to look at Su Wang. Kill him. Su Wang was stunned and then he drew his sword. A strand of sword energy tore through the surroundings. A wisp of viciousness flashed through the Wasteland God's eyes. A mere life god realm cultivator dares to attack me? You're courting death. As he spoke, he suddenly took a step forward and smashed his fist forward. Bang! An expanse of sword energy was blasted apart while the Wasteland God was pushed over 3 kilometers back. When he finally stopped moving, his entire right arm had been split into 2. The Wasteland God was stunned by this scene. My arm was split apart by a single strike from an ant at the Life God realm? It wasn't just the Wasteland God, even Mu Xin was quite shocked. Su Wang's combat strength actually became so terrifying after he obtained this senior sword. Even though Su Wang was pushed back as well, her eyes were filled with excitement. She was confident in her ability to kill a nascent soul realm expert right now. The boost from the sword in his hand was simply too terrifying. Su Wang was about to attack again, but Yixian suddenly said, "Stand down for now." Hearing Yixian's words, Wang Ke did not hesitate at all. He turned around and turned into a beam of sword light that landed behind Yixian. The wilderness god frowned slightly at the sight of this, and he gazed at Yixian. Who are you? At this moment he also realized that Yixian was not simple. Yixian smiled and looked at Mu Senior. Aren't you going to introduce us? Mu Xin was stunned and then he hurriedly said, Wasteland God, this is Senior Yixian, a fate knower. Fate-knowing state? The wilderness god was stunned when he heard this. Meanwhile, Yixian gazed at the wilderness god and said, Let me ask you a question. I'll obliterate you if you answer me wrongly. As he spoke, he took a step forward, and a mysterious space-time enveloped the god of wilderness. The wasteland god's expression changed drastically. Chapter 1929. What sort of space-time is this? The god's eyes were filled with shock. Could this fellow really be a Destiny Realm expert? Zhou Xian gazed at the god, and then he opened his palm to reveal a portrait. Do you recognize this person? The god frowned slightly as he glanced at the portrait. It's her. Obviously they knew each other. Zhou Xian said, where is she now? The god glanced at Zhou Xian and fell silent. Zhou Xian's eyes narrowed slightly. Do you want to die? The god's expression changed slightly, and then he glanced at Mu Xin and Xuwang, who stood respectfully behind Zhou Xian. He hesitated for a moment before he said, she's currently trapped in a space-time cage. Zhou Xian's brows knit together slightly. A space-time cage? The god gazed at Zhou Xian. You don't know what a space-time cage is? Mu Xin looked at Zhou Xian with slight surprise as well. Zhou Xian's face was expressionless. Should I know about such a low-level thing? The god's mouth twitched. Is it low-level? Zhou Xian waved his hand. Cut the crap. Take me there. The god glanced at Zhou Xian but didn't say anything. Zhou Xian turned around to look at Mu Xin and Xuwang. Chop him up. Xuwang didn't hesitate to transform into a ray of light that slashed down. The god's expression changed drastically when he saw this. He wasn't afraid of Xuwang, but he was very afraid of the sword in Xuwang's hand because that sword could easily tear his body apart. Most importantly, Mu Xin was right there. If the two of them were to join forces, they would be able to kill him with ease. The god hurriedly said, wait. In the distance, Zhou Xian said, stop. Xuwang immediately stopped, and then he retreated respectfully behind Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian gazed at the god. Take me there. The wilderness god took a deep glance at Zhou Xian and then he said, come with me. With that he turned around and the space in front of him turned pitch black. The god of the wilderness had entered. Zhou Xian opened his palm, and the green profound sword in Xuwang's hand fell into his hand. He followed them in. Mu Xin and Xuwang hurriedly followed. Soon the four of them arrived at a mysterious space-time. This space-time was like a cage and it was very, very sturdy. Zhou Xian looked into the distance and saw a woman in the distance. It was none other than Sister Shui. At that moment, Sister Shui was locked in a space-time prison. Not far from her stood two middle-aged men. At this moment, Xuwang, who was beside Zhou Xian, said in a deep voice, the one on the left is King Martial Spirit and the one on the right is Zhao Xianxia. Zhou Xian glanced at them and then he gazed at Sister Shui. At this moment, even though Sister Shui was imprisoned, she was fine. Meanwhile, Yang Yanxue noticed Zhou Xian as well. She was slightly stunned when she saw Zhou Xian and then she smiled. What are you doing here? All of them gazed at Zhou Xian when they heard Yang Yanxue. Zhou Xian smiled. Let's not talk about that for now. As he spoke, he walked slowly towards Yang Yanxue. King Martial Spirit and Zhao Xianxiao frowned when they witnessed this scene. On the other hand, the wilderness god glanced at Zhou Xian and remained silent. At this moment he was quite fearful of Zhou Xian. Actually, he was afraid that this fellow might really be at the Destiny Realm. Right when Zhou Xian approached the space-time cage, a wisp of a cold glow flashed in King Martial Spirit's eyes, and he was about to attack. However, Zhao Xianxiao stopped him. Zhao Xianxiao gazed at Zhou Xian and said, let's wait and see. King Martial Spirit hesitated for a moment, but he didn't choose to attack in the end. After all, it was a spatial cage and it was one that he and Zhao Xianxiao had jointly set up. It was utterly impossible for an ordinary person to break through. At this moment Zhou Xian suddenly said, open. As soon as he finished speaking, he stepped into the spatial cage. King Martial Spirit and Zhao Xianxiao were stunned when they witnessed this scene. He went in just like that. On the other side, the wilderness god had an extremely solemn expression on his face as well. This fellow can actually disregard the spatial cage? Is he really at the Destiny Realm? Zhou Xian walked over to Yang Yanxue and he smiled, let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, he took Yang Yanshue's hand. In an instant, the mysterious spatial energy around Yang Yanxue vanished. A wisp of surprise flashed through Yang Yanshue's eyes when she witnessed this scene. Just like that, Zhou Xian pulled Yang Yanxue out of the spatial cage. On the other side, King Martial Spirit and Zhao Xianxiao had extremely unsightly expressions on their faces. King Martial Spirit was about to attack when Zhao Xianxiao stopped him. Meanwhile, Yi Xian turned around to gaze at King Martial Spirit and Zhou Xian. He didn't speak and he just smiled with disdain. It was like he was looking at two ants. King Martial Spirit's expression instantly turned gloomy when he witnessed this scene, and he suddenly clenched his right hand and was about to attack. Meanwhile, Musen suddenly smiled. King Martial Spirit, what? You intend to attack a Destiny Realm expert? Destiny Realm? King Martial Spirit was stunned, and then he gazed at Yi Xian with disbelief in his eyes. Destiny? Destiny Realm? Xianxia's face was covered in disbelief as well. When did a Destiny Realm expert appear in Heaven Horizon? Meanwhile, Yi Xian had left with Yang Yanxue. Mu Xin and Su Wang hurriedly followed them. King Martial Spirit and the others had extremely unsightly expressions on their faces. Meanwhile, Zhou Xian suddenly said, "Is he really a Destiny Realm expert?" As he spoke, he gazed at the Wasteland's god. The Wasteland's god fell silent for a moment before he said, "I don't know." Zhou Xian frowned slightly. "You don't know?" The Wasteland's god spoke in a low voice. "I suspected it as well. However, you've also seen how respectful Mu Sun and that sword cultivator woman are towards him. Not only that, but he can also ignore this spacetime prison. Most importantly, I saw him use an extremely mysterious spacetime. I've never seen that spacetime before." Zhao Xinxiao's expression was quite unsightly when he heard this. King Martial Spirit's expression was extremely gloomy as well. He hadn't expected that a Destiny Realm expert would actually appear here. The cooked duck had flown away. Suddenly, a woman appeared here. It was Xinqin. King Martial Spirit and the others gazed at Xinqin, and she spoke indifferently. "Do all of you really believe that he's at the Destiny Realm?" The Wasteland's god stared at her. "What do you mean?" Xinqin smiled. "What do I mean? Let me tell all of you that fellow isn't at the Destiny Realm at all. He's at the Seamless Realm." The Wasteland's god spoke coldly. "You say that he's only at the Seamless Realm. Then let me ask you, why is he able to disregard the spatial cage? Is that spacetime cage fake?" Xinqin spoke coldly. "The reason he can disregard the spatial cage is because of that sword in his hand. That sword is extremely special and it can disregard any spatial cage. It's not because of his own strength." The Wasteland's god spoke in a low voice. "That sword can disregard any spatial cage?" Xinqin nodded. "Yes." The Wasteland's god continued. "Why can it disregard space?" Xinqin spoke indifferently. "How would I know?" The Wasteland's god smiled. "Miss, if what you said is true and he isn't at the Destiny Realm, then why is that sword in his hand so terrifying? Can actually disregard any spatial cage? You've already answered that question, so let me ask another one. Where did this sword come from?" Xinqin remained expressionless. "How would I know?" The Wasteland's god smiled. "You don't know? Then let me ask you again, you're also a peak primordial spirit powerhouse, so can you create a divine item that can disregard any spatial cage?" Xinqin was silent. Because she couldn't. The wilderness god shook his head and smiled. Furthermore, he used an extremely mysterious spacetime. I've never seen such a mysterious spacetime before. What I can confirm is that this mysterious spacetime surpasses any spacetime that I know of. Miss, can you tell me where this mysterious spacetime came from? Xinqin looked at the Wasteland's god. "I'm here to tell you that he isn't at the Destiny Realm. Why are you talking so much?" The Wasteland's god smiled. "Even if he really isn't at the Destiny Realm, he's definitely not an ordinary person. He might even have a Destiny Realm powerhouse backing him. Otherwise, he would never be in possession of these divine items." He shook his head and smiled. "That Musen isn't a fool either, so why is he so respectful to that young man? No matter what the reason is, one thing is for sure, that young man is not simple." Xinqin looked at the Wasteland's god, not saying a word. The Wasteland's god continued. "Miss, you're telling us all of this because you want us to make a move against him. In other words, you're enemies with that young man, but you don't dare to make a move against him. Since he's only at the Seamless Path, then why don't you make a move against him? Make a move against him." Xinqin's expression was quite unsightly. The Wasteland's god glanced at Xinqin with disdain. "Do I look like a retard to you?" As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Xinqin fell silent for a moment and she intended to leave as well. Meanwhile, King Martial Spirit spoke abruptly. "Miss, is that young man really not at the Destiny Realm?" Xinqin glanced at King Martial Spirit. "Believe it or not, King Martial Spirit chuckled. Of course I believe it. Because if that young man really is at the Destiny Realm, then he'll absolutely not let us go. Moreover, he hasn't made a move against us. Zhou Xian spoke solemnly, just as the Wasteland's god said, that young man isn't an ordinary person. King Martial Spirit spoke ferociously, we've been chasing that woman for an entire month and we're just about to obtain the mine. Why should we give it up the moment he arrives? As he spoke, his expression grew even more ferocious. So long as he isn't at the Destiny Realm, then why should we be afraid of him? Zhou Xian was slightly hesitant. King Martial Spirit gazed at Xianxia. Miss, do you want to join forces? Xianxia hesitated for a moment and said, all right. King Martial Spirit said, let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot with Xianxia. Zhou Xian hesitated for a moment, but he didn't choose to join forces because he trusted the Wasteland's god's words more. Xian's group had just returned to Skypole City when King Martial Spirit and Xianxia appeared before them. Xian frowned when he saw this. King Martial Spirit gazed at Mu Sr. Musin, he isn't a Destiny Realm expert at all. The reason he's able to disregard space is entirely because of that sword in his hand. Without that sword he's nothing. Musin frowned when he heard this and then he gazed at Xian. Xian smiled. It was this young lady who told you that, right? Xianxia gazed at Xian. Are you still going to continue acting? Xian smiled and then he opened his palm, causing the green profound sword to fly over to King Martial Spirit. Didn't she say that this sword is formidable? Come use it. King Martial Spirit's eyes narrowed slightly and then he glanced at Xianxia. Xianxia remained silent because she felt that something was off. Meanwhile, King Martial Spirit suddenly grasped the sword and slashed down. A ray of light slashed down and space was torn apart. However, this was King Martial Spirit's own strength. King Martial Spirit was stunned. He was unwilling to give up and he studied the green profound sword once more. However, he didn't notice anything special about it. It was a completely useless sword. At this moment Xian, who was far away, suddenly walked towards King Martial Spirit slowly. He said with a smile, the sword is extraordinary because of the person. In the hands of some people this sword is a very ordinary sword. But in my hands, it is the most invincible sword in the world. As he spoke, he gazed at King Martial Spirit and smiled. The sword isn't important. What's important is the person who uses it. A sword is extraordinary because of the person, understand? Everyone was speechless. Chapter 1930. Fear arose in King Wuling's eyes as he gazed at Xian who was walking over. Meanwhile, Xianxia suddenly laughed coldly. Xian, you're still putting on an act. If you're really at the Fate Knower realm, then kill us. Xian gazed at Xianxia and smiled. Kill you? Are you even worthy? Xianxia's expression instantly became extremely unsightly. What are you putting on an act for? Right at this moment Yang Mianxue suddenly vanished on the spot. Xianxia's expression instantly changed drastically, and she swiftly raised her arm to block it. Bang! Along with a deafening explosion, Xianxia was blasted 30 kilometers away. As soon as she stopped moving, the expansive space behind her was obliterated. Xian was shocked at the sight of that. That Sister Shui was awesome. Yang Mianxue glanced at Xianxia who'd been blasted away and smiled. Do you know who he is? As she spoke, she turned around to gaze at Xian, and then the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. He's my master. He attained the Fate Knower realm 1,000,000 years ago. Master. Everyone here was stunned when they heard Yang Mianxue. Xian was the same, but he quickly returned to normal. Obviously, Big Sister Shui was playing along with his act. Big Sister Shui knows what to do. Xianxia stared fixedly at Yang Mianxue. It's impossible for you to be his disciple. He's just a cultivator of the seamless Tao. Yang Mianxue shook her head. You really are an idiot. As she spoke, she turned around to gaze at King Wuling. King Wuling's expression changed slightly, and he hurriedly said, Sorry for the disturbance. As soon as he finished speaking, he hurriedly let go of the green profound sword, and it floated slowly over to Xian. Xian held the green profound sword in his hand and swung it lightly. In an instant the space in the surroundings started to warp. King Wuling's eyelids twitched slightly when he witnessed this scene. Xian glanced at King Wuling and smiled. I'm taking the Sky Palace crystal mine. If you're disgruntled, then feel free to call for revenge. No matter how many. I'm invincible, so do as you please. Everyone was speechless. King Wuling glanced at Yi Xian and hurriedly said, I wouldn't dare. This junior will take his leave. With that he turned around and disappeared. Yi Xian glanced at Xianxia in the distance and smiled. Lady Xianxia, on account of our past relationship I won't kill you today, you may leave. However, don't pester me anymore. I'm wholeheartedly pursuing the Dao and I don't want to be tied down by relationships. Mu Sen and Su Wang's expressions became strange when they heard this. No wonder. So there was something going on between the two of them. Xianxia's expression became extremely unsightly. Yi Xian, what nonsense are you spouting? When have I ever had any feelings for you? Yi Xian smiled and said, let's go. With that he turned around and left. The divine quilt said angrily, speak clearly. She was about to chase after Yi Xian when Yang Yanxue suddenly blocked her way. Yang Yanxue looked at the divine quilt and said with a smile, let's go back. With that she turned around and left. Xianxia's expression was extremely unsightly. Meanwhile Xianghou appeared by her side. She glanced at her and smiled. I told you not to expose him because it was useless. But you refused to believe me. Now you've suffered a loss, right? Xianxia remained expressionless. All of you are a bunch of idiots. Xianghou shook her head. If you aren't an idiot, then why didn't you do anything to him? Xianxia glanced at Xianghou. What are you trying to say? Xianghou smiled. I'm trying to say that you're an idiot. As soon as she finished speaking she turned around and left. Xianxia spoke coldly. Xianghou, let me see how you'll obtain that mysterious space from him. Xianghou licked her candied paws and didn't even look back. You don't have to worry about that. Xianxia's expression grew more and more unsightly. As soon as he found out that Yi Xian had returned to the city, the old man Profundity had immediately come out to greet Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian didn't leave just like that. He asked the old man Profundity to arrange a place for him to stay. Within a pavilion. Only Yi Xian and Yang Yanxue were within a room. Yi Xian smiled. Long time no see, big sister Shui. Yang Yanxue sized Yi Xian up and smiled. I never expected that you would come to save me. As she spoke she sized up Yi Xian again. Are you really just a cultivator of the seamless path? Yi Xian nodded. Yang Yanxue gave him a thumbs up. Amazing. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Big sister Shui, what do you plan to do after this? Yang Yanxue glanced at the surroundings and said, I want to take you somewhere. Yi Xian asked, where? Yang Yanxue smiled, an ancient ruin. I obtained this heaven pole crystal or from that ancient ruin. However, I didn't go deep into it and I was just at the outer area. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. Big sister Shui, why didn't father bring you along with him? Yang Yanxue immediately shook her head. Following father is truly too boring. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. It's really dangerous outside. Yang Yanxue smiled. It's good to be dangerous. Danger can temper oneself. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, that's true. Yang Yanxue glanced outside and said, let's set out in a while. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, should we bring Mu Sen and the others with us? Yang Yanxue smiled. Why? Yi Xian said, I think that we can be of use. Moreover, it's a chaotic place so it's good to have 2 more helpers. Yang Yanxue spoke in a low voice. Aren't you afraid that they'll see through you? Yi Xian smiled. What's there to be afraid of? Don't I still have you, big sister Shui? Yang Yanxue asked. Are you afraid that woman and the martial spirit king will spoil our plans again? Yi Xian nodded. I haven't done anything so they'll get suspicious in the end. Moreover, you have a mine in your possession so they won't give up on it. Yang Yanxue nodded. Then I'll take it with me. As soon as she finished speaking, both of them left the pavilion. On the other hand, Mu Sen, Old Man Profound and Xu Wang were waiting outside. Old Man Profound hurriedly said when he saw Yi Xian, Senior, are you uncomfortable? Yi Xian smiled. It's very comfortable. As he spoke, he glanced at the 3 of them and said, my disciple said that she discovered an ancient ruin and her mine was discovered there. Are the 3 of you interested in going with her? The 3 of them were overjoyed when they heard this. Old Man Profound hurriedly said, of course I'm interested. But, is it convenient for us to go with her? Yi Xian said with a smile, why not? Old Man Profound immediately bowed slightly. Thank you, Senior. Mu Sen bowed deeply as well. Thank you. Yi Xian gazed at Xu Wang. You come with us as well. I'll guide you in the meantime so that you can attain the nascent soul realm. Xiwang was excited when he heard this and he immediately bowed respectfully. Thank you, senior. Yixian smiled. Xiwang's combat strength was extremely formidable, so if he attained the nascent soul realm and possessed the green profound sword, then he would absolutely be invincible in the nascent soul realm. A short moment later they set out. Old Man Profound spoke solemnly on the way. Senior, 2 women have been constantly following us from the shadows. Should we? Yixian turned around to glance at them. He naturally knew who Old Man Profound was talking about. It was naturally Xianxia and Xianxia. They were very patient and had followed them all the way here. Yixian shook his head and smiled. I know them. Let them follow us. When she spoke up to hear, she sighed softly. I can only blame myself for being too playful all those years ago. Hearing this, Old Man Profound Ji was taken aback and then he laughed awkwardly. Xianxia gazed at Yixian and the others in the distance. Where are they going? Xianxia spoke indifferently. Who knows? Xianxia glanced at Xianxia and said, the members of the Tendo sect have arrived. Xianxia shook her head. What's the point? Not to mention them, even if the sect master of the Tendo sect were to be reborn, what's the point? Didn't you see? That fellow has 4 extraordinary bodyguards by his side right now. 4 extraordinary bodyguards. Xianxia's expression was slightly unsightly when she heard this. Xianxia shook her head and sighed. Damn it. Let me see how long this fellow can keep up his act. Xianxia looked towards the distance with an expressionless face. If he encounters a true fate knower. At this point she didn't continue speaking. A true fate knower expert? Even she hadn't seen one. Such an expert was truly too rare. In the distance, under Yang Nianshue's lead, everyone headed straight for the ancient ruins. On the way, Yixian gazed at Xiwang. Enter Xiaota's body and cultivate. Xiwang was stunned and then his voice trembled. Can I? Yixian nodded. Of course. As he spoke, he gazed at Yang Nianxue. Heaven limit crystals. Yang Nianxue smiled and then she tapped with her finger, causing a spatial ring to descend before Xiwang. Xiwang glanced at the spatial ring, and there were an entire 50,000 heaven limit crystals within it. Xiwang's expression instantly changed when he witnessed this scene. This? After all, she relied on robbing others to obtain heaven limit crystals every single time, and she'd obtained 1,000 heaven limit crystals at most every year. Moreover, she'd exchanged her life for them. Yet now Xiwang had given her 50,000 heaven limit crystals. Yang Nianxue smiled. 50,000 heaven limit crystals should be sufficient for you to attain the soul origin realm. If it's not enough, then I'll give you more. Xiwang bowed deeply. Thank you. As she spoke, she gazed at Yixian. Yixian smiled. Miss Xiwang, we can be considered to be fated. How about this? If you're willing, then take me as your master. Not only will I help you attain the soul origin realm, I'll even teach you a peerless and extraordinary sword technique. Mu Xin and Old Man Profundity were visibly moved when they heard this. Both of them glanced at Xiwang with a trace of envy in their eyes. Take her as his master. That's equivalent to finding an extraordinary backer. Xiwang didn't hesitate at all and he immediately bowed deeply. Greetings, master. Yixian roared with laughter. There's no need for such formalities. Enter the tower and cultivate. If there's anything you don't understand, then feel free to ask me. Xiwang nodded. All right. As soon as she finished speaking, she entered Xiaota's body. Inside Xiaota, Xiwang gazed at the spatial ring in her hand and she took a deep breath. As long as she had enough heaven limit crystals, she was confident that she could attain the soul origin realm. This was how the world was. No matter how hard you worked or how talented you were, if you didn't have money, then it was all nonsense. Most of the time, if someone helped you up, then your life would be completely different. After a while, Xiwang slowly closed her eyes and began to cultivate. Chapter 1931. 2 hours later, Yixian's group arrived at the depths of a mountain range. Mu Xin glanced at the surroundings and said, Miss Xue, this is the ancient ruin? Yang Nianxue nodded. Mu Xin spoke in a low voice, but there's nothing here. Yang Nianxue smiled. There's a secret here. As she spoke, she walked over to a nearby tree, and then she pressed down lightly with her right hand. A strand of mysterious energy seeped into the tree, and then the mountain that was over 1 kilometer away actually started to become illusory. Not long after, under everyone's watchful eyes, the mountain slowly split open, and an ancient black palace appeared within the mountain. Musin and the others were visibly moved when they witnessed this scene. Both of them were about to head over when they seemed to have thought of something, and they stopped and turned around to look at Xian. Meanwhile, Xianxia smiled and said, "This place isn't simple at all. For example, there's a spatial formation not too far away from us. Outsiders will instantly lose their sense of direction upon entering it, and then they'll fall into a boundless spatial abyss. Even a soul core realm expert can't disregard the spatial abyss there." Musin spoke in a low voice. "Thank you for the warning, Miss Shui." Xian smiled. "Let's go." As soon as he finished speaking, he walked towards the distance. Musin and the old man hurriedly followed him. When Xian's group stepped foot into that expansive space had instantly crisscrossed. The expressions of Musin and the others changed slightly when they witnessed this scene. Meanwhile, a mysterious spacetime suddenly appeared around Xian, and as soon as this mysterious spacetime appeared, the spacetime formations in the surroundings started to disperse bit by bit. They weren't able to endure Xian's mysterious space at all. Musin and Old Man Profundity exchanged glances when they witnessed this scene, and there was a wisp of shock in their eyes. "He really is a big shot." Xianxia was quite shocked as well. In the beginning she'd thought that Xian was putting on a show, but she'd recently noticed that Xian was actually quite formidable. Xian turned around to gaze at them and smiled. "Let's go." All of them continued forward. When they arrived at the foot of the mountain, there was a middle-aged man standing on the stone steps. The middle-aged man was wearing a very simple gray robe and a bamboo hat. His eyes were slightly closed and he did not seem to be alive. Xian glanced at the middle-aged man, and at this moment the middle-aged man slowly opened his eyes. Musin and the old man's expressions changed slightly when they saw this scene, and they secretly raised their guard in their hearts. Because the two of them couldn't see through this middle-aged man. The middle-aged man's gaze landed on Xian without saying a word. Xian was silent. For a time the surroundings fell silent. At this time, Xian suddenly took a step forward. The middle-aged man still didn't say anything. He just looked at Xian. At this moment Xian suddenly released a mysterious spacetime that enveloped the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man was slightly stunned and a trace of astonishment flashed through his eyes. "This." Xian smiled and said, "How should I address you?" The middle-aged man looked at Xian. "You're not simple at all." Xian grinned. "Can we go up?" The middle-aged man shook his head. "No." Xian smiled. "Why?" The middle-aged man said, "All of you aren't fated people." Fated people. The corners of Xian's mouth curled up slightly. "What are fated people?" The middle-aged man gazed at Xian. "If I'm fated, then Master will give me information." But Master didn't give me any information. Xian raised his head to look at the palace above the stone steps, and then he opened his palm. The green sword floated slowly towards the black palace. The middle-aged man frowned when he saw this, but he didn't stop Qinshi. A short moment later, a hoarse voice suddenly resounded from within the palace. "Fellow Daoist, please come up here." Musin and the old man exchanged glances when they heard the voice from within the palace, and they were extremely shocked in their hearts. Obviously, the master of the palace was a Destiny Realm expert and he'd acknowledged Xian. This was normal. After all, they were both at the Destiny Realm. Xian gazed at the middle-aged man and the middle-aged man bowed slightly. "Please." Xian turned around to look at Xianxia. Xianxia smiled and said, "Go ahead." Xian nodded and then he walked towards the palace. It didn't take long for Xian to arrive within the palace. The palace was completely empty and there was only a single statue there. Moreover, the green sword hovered silently in front of the statue. Xian gazed at the statue and then it suddenly became illusory. After that, a white-haired old man appeared in front of Xian. The white-haired old man wore a white robe and his hair and beard were completely white. He seemed extremely sage-like. The white-haired old man gazed at Xian and said with a smile, "You've surprised me slightly." Xian smiled. "What surprise?" The white-haired old man glanced at the green sword and then he smiled. "This isn't an ordinary sword. However, it's absolutely not yours. Moreover, you aren't a Destiny Realm expert, you've attained the Seamless Tao." Xian fell silent. At this moment he was sure that the white-haired old man really was at the Destiny realm. Moreover, he was utterly unable to deceive an expert of such a level. Fortunately, he'd sealed off Xiao Ta, so Su Wang couldn't hear the conversation between him and the white-haired old man. The white-haired old man spoke abruptly. You revealed a mysterious form of space when you entered just now. Can you let me take a look at it again? Yi Xian glanced at the white-haired old man. He fell silent for a moment before he took a step forward, and then the mysterious space appeared here. The white-haired old man glanced at the surroundings, and then a wisp of excitement flickered in his eyes. What a formidable space. I've actually never seen it before. Not only have I never seen it, I've never even heard of it. Yi Xian didn't say anything. Meanwhile, the white-haired old man gazed at the green sword. Moreover, this sword of yours is truly extraordinary. The profundities of space and time contained within it are truly profound. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, don't tell me you have other intentions? The white-haired old man blinked. I left this strand of my soul here with the intention of finding an inheritor. However, I never expected that I wouldn't be able to find an inheritor and would encounter you instead. Yi Xian smiled. I can be Senior's inheritor. The white-haired old man smiled. Just as well. However, what gift do you intend to give me? Yi Xian smiled. Senior, don't tell me you want my sword in that mysterious space? The white-haired old man gazed at Yi Xian. What if I say yes? Yi Xian smiled. Senior, you're only a strand of your soul. The white-haired old man roared with laughter. I knew you'd say that. Look outside. Yi Xian turned around and looked outside the hall. A mysterious force suddenly swept down from the clouds above the hall, and then the entire space and time in the surroundings started to seethe along with the assault of this force. At the foot of the mountain, Mu Xin and Old Man Profundity were horrified. The powerful aura pressed down upon them to the point they found it difficult to breathe. The Life-Knower realm. A white-robed old man slowly walked down from above the clouds. At the sight of that, Yi Xian's face fell in the hall. Damn it. For the sake of obtaining the green sword and the mysterious space within my body, this fellow actually came in person. Isn't he thinking too highly of me? The white-robed old man glanced at Mu Sen's group of three. In the next moment, a mysterious force directly locked down Mu Sen's group of three. Bang, bang, bang. Their bodies shook violently and they weren't able to move at all. Yang Yanshu's brows knit together slightly, and then a strand of light silently condensed into form at the center of her palm. However, she didn't attack. The white-robed old man walked slowly into the hall, and then he gazed at Yi Xian and smiled. The mysterious space within your body and the sword in your hand are mine. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, then you have to ask the person behind me if he agrees. The white-robed old man's eyes narrowed slightly. The person behind you? Yi Xian smiled. Senior, if the person behind me agrees, then I'll give these 2 divine artifacts to you right away. The white-robed old man smiled. Are you threatening me? Yi Xian shook his head. I wouldn't dare. Could it be that Senior doesn't want to see the person behind me first before deciding if he wants these 2 divine artifacts? The white-robed old man roared with laughter. All right, then let me see who the great figure behind you is. Yi Xian nodded, and then he passed the green profound sword to the white-robed old man. Senior, you can use this sword to find the person behind me. The white-robed old man glanced at Yi Xian, and then he took the green profound sword and said, the old man has traversed countless universes, and there have been people that the old man fears. However, there are no more than 2 of them. As he spoke, he gazed at the green profound sword in his hand and then he smiled. Let me see who the person behind you is. Yi Xian smiled but didn't say anything. The white-robed old man suddenly tightened his grip on the green profound sword, and it trembled violently. The space before him gradually warped, and at the same time, it gradually became illusory. Yi Xian gazed at the white-robed old man. He didn't speak. Right at this moment, the white-robed old man suddenly smiled. I hope the person behind you doesn't disappoint the old man. Yi Xian grinned. Senior, I have a question. The white-robed old man roared with laughter. You can ask it later. Yi Xian shook his head. It's better to ask it now. I'm afraid I won't be able to ask it later. The white-robed old man frowned slightly. What do you mean? Yi Xian didn't answer him and he asked instead, Senior, have you seen an expert above the predestined realm? The white-robed old man was stunned and then he smiled. Are you trying to say that the person behind you is an expert above the predestined realm? Xian smiled and didn't speak. The white-robed old man shook his head and smiled. How laughable. There's no such thing as a realm above the predestined realm in this world because no one has created it until now. You're actually trying to deceive me? How foolish. Xian grinned and didn't speak. Right at this moment, the white-robed old man suddenly raised his head and looked into the sky, and his eyes narrowed slightly. I sense it. A strand of sword light suddenly entered between the white-robed old man's brows. Bang! The white-robed old man's figure shook violently, and the vitality within his body was directly eliminated. The white-robed old man's eyes were wide open, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. Killed in a second? I was killed in a second? At this moment his mind was in a complete mess. He was an expert at the peak of the predestined realm, but he was killed in a second. And he didn't even know who killed him in a second. The white-robed old man looked at Xian, and just as he was about to speak, Xian suddenly wielded his sword, and the white-robed old man's head was directly cut off. At the same time, the white-robed old man's storage ring was taken by Xian. Xian didn't look at the storage ring. Instead he carried the white-robed old man's head and walked out. When Mu Xin and the other two saw the white-robed old man's head, they directly froze on the spot. The middle-aged man was also dumbfounded. His master was dead? Xian smiled lightly. We didn't have a good talk, so I killed him. Unfortunately, he was too weak and couldn't even take a sword from me. As he spoke, he sighed softly. Are all the predestined realm experts in this era so weak? I only used 30% of my strength in that sword just now. Everyone. P.S. Asking for votes. Chapter 1932. At this moment all of them were stunned. A life-knower realm expert had been killed. Moreover, he'd been killed with such ease. What did this mean? It meant that the gap in their strengths was too huge. Xian walked over to the others with the old man's head in his hand, and then he gazed at the middle-aged man who stood on guard below the stairs. The middle-aged man's expression changed drastically, and his eyes were filled with terror. He knew how terrifying his master was, and it was even his master's true body this time. However, he hadn't expected that his true body would be instantly killed as well. How terrifying is this fellow's strength? He killed a life-knower realm expert in an instant. Xian gazed at the middle-aged man and smiled. What's your name? The middle-aged man hesitated for a moment before his voice trembled. Mu Jianghe. Xian smiled. Follow me from now on. The middle-aged man was stunned, and then he hurriedly bowed respectfully. From now on I, Mu Jianghe, pledge my loyalty to Senior and I'm willing to serve you faithfully. Xian smiled and then he passed the head to Mu Jianghe. Bury him. We were once master and servant after all. Mu Jianghe was slightly hesitant. Xian smiled. Don't worry, I'm not testing you. There's no need for me to do this, right? Mu Jianghe was relieved when he heard this. He took the head and his hands trembled as he gazed at it. On the other hand, Mu Xin and Old Man Profundity couldn't help but bow. Since he was able to instantly kill a life-knower realm expert, it meant that this senior wasn't an ordinary life-knower realm expert. He's too strong. I must hug him properly. Xian glanced at the surroundings and then he smiled. This is a small abode. At this moment Mu Jianghe, who had returned, hurriedly said, this place used to be the territory of the mysterious East sect. Later my master. The former master took a fancy to it, so he destroyed the mysterious East sect and took it for himself. Xian smiled. There are heaven-rank crystals here? Mu Jianghe nodded. Moreover, there are 3 top-grade heaven-rank crystals here. 3. Xian narrowed his eyes and looked at Yang Yanxue. The corners of Yang Yanshua's mouth lifted. I'll do it. As she said that, she pressed her right hand down lightly. In an instant the entire ground trembled violently. Gradually, the ground split open and 3 supreme-grade Heaven Supreme crystals appeared before everyone's eyes. Every single crystal mine contained close to 100,000 top-grade Heaven Supreme crystals. The eyes of Mu Xin and Old Man Profound Secrets turned red when they saw this scene. That was over 100,000 supreme-grade Heaven Supreme crystals. Moreover, it was of the highest quality. One had to know that 1 supreme-grade heaven-grade crystal was equivalent to 5 ordinary heaven-grade crystals. Although their eyes were red, Mu Xin and Old Man Profound Secrets were still very calm. Meanwhile, Mu Jianghe hesitated for a moment before he said, Senior, if you take them away then they'll be useless. Yixian was puzzled. Why? Mu Jianghe smiled bitterly. Because these 3 crystal mines can only survive here. If they leave this place their spiritual qi will leak out. Without the nourishment of the power of the earth vein, they won't be able to condense the supreme heaven crystal anymore. That's why their previous master didn't take them with him all those years ago. Yixian glanced down. Sure enough, it was just as Mu Jianghe said, there was extremely pure energy of the earth vein beneath the ground. As if he'd thought of something, Yixian grinned, I have a better place than this. As he spoke, he immediately placed the 3 supreme-grade heaven supreme crystals into Xiao Ta's storage ring. After he placed the 3 supreme-grade heaven supreme crystals into Xiao Ta, Yixian suddenly thought of something, and it was that the flow of time within the pagoda was different from the outside world. For example, it took 10 years to condense a single supreme-grade heaven supreme crystal in the outside world. But if the heaven supreme crystal mine was within Xiao Ta's storage ring, then it meant that he would be able to obtain one in a single day. What a huge profit! As if he'd thought of something, Yixian looked at Mu Sun and Old Man Profound Ji and smiled. My disciple and I will each take a heaven supreme crystal mine. I won't give you the remaining one, but I can give you the 120,000 supreme-grade heaven supreme crystals in it. What do you think? Hearing this, the 2 of them instantly became excited. Mu Sun's voice trembled. Senior, the 2 of us didn't do anything. Yixian smiled. Since you're following me, then you should at least get some soup when I have meat to eat. Otherwise, what's the point of you following me? As he spoke, he pointed with his finger and 2 spatial rings floated in front of the 2 of them. Mu Sun and Old Man Profound Ji hesitated. Yixian smiled. I'll give it to you. Just take it. Old Man Profound Ji smiled bitterly. Senior, the 2 of us didn't do anything to help you. This is too much for us to accept. Yixian smiled. That's enough. Just take it. Hearing this, the 2 of them no longer hesitated and immediately accepted the 2 spatial rings. After Old Man Profound Ji accepted the spatial rings, he bowed deeply to Yixian. I, Profound Ji, will never forget Senior's kindness. In the future, if Senior needs anything, just let me know. I, Profound Ji, will definitely not refuse. Mu Sun also bowed deeply. Senior, my life is yours from now on. Yixian smiled. Let's cut the formalities. I still need to stay in the heavenly limit realm for some time. During this time I might need you to help me with something. Mu Sun hurriedly said, I'm willing to serve Senior. Old Man Profound Ji also hurriedly said, I'm willing to serve Senior. Yixian smiled. Let's go. After saying this, he led the group out of the ancient ruins. After returning to the heavenly limit city, Yixian and Yang Yanxue returned to the room that Old Man Profound Ji had arranged for them. Yixian smiled. Sister, we've struck it big this time. As he spoke, he took out the spatial ring of the life-knowing state expert. There were over 1 million top-grade sky crystals in the spatial ring. Moreover, there were some divine objects in the spatial ring and it was obvious that they were priceless. Yang Yanxue rummaged through the spatial ring, and in the end she took out a blood-red flag. This thing isn't simple. Yixian looked at the flag and there were 3 large blood-red words written on it. Soul Summoning Banner. Yixian smiled. Sister Shui, you can choose whatever you want. Yang Yanxue smiled. Let me study this. As she spoke, she put the soul summoning banner away and then she took out a black ring. She sized up the ring and smiled. So it's a guardian ring. Yixian was slightly curious. Guardian ring? Yang Yanxue nodded. This spatial ring is quite interesting. It contains 9 mysterious guardian spacetime. And once activated, the 9 guardian spacetime can combine into one, and it's more than enough to block a life-knowing state expert's all-out attack. Saying this, she looked at Yixian. That old man didn't use this ring until he died. Was she the one who made the move? Yixian nodded. Yang Yanxue shook her head with a complicated expression. No wonder that old man didn't even have a chance to fight back. Destiny. If that woman made a move, even 10 life-knowing state experts would be instantly killed. Yang Yanxue handed the spatial ring to Yixian. You keep it. However, Yixian shook his head. You keep it. Yang Yanxue smiled. I don't need this thing, but you can. Just as Yixian was about to say something, Yang Yanxue glared at Yixian. I said it's for you, so it's for you. Cut the crap. Saying this, she put the spatial ring away. The guardian ring is for you and everything else in the spatial ring is for me. Hearing this, Yi Xian was dumbfounded, and the gratitude he felt just now vanished without a trace. This big sister must be a bandit. There are 1,000,000 supreme-grade heavenly G crystals in there. Seeing Yi Xian's dumbfounded expression, Yang Yanxua blinked. You can't bear to part with it? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then said, Of course I can bear to give it to you, big sister, but... Suddenly Yang Yanxua slapped Yi Xian's shoulder. Good little brother. Yi Xian, Yang Yanxua continued. I want to break through to life-knowing state. Yi Xian was surprised. Break through to life-knowing state? Yang Yanxua nodded. I need a lot of heavenly G crystals. Even 1,000,000 might not be enough. Yi Xian said in a low voice. Is it that terrifying? Yang Yanxua rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. What else can I do? You should know that there are pitifully few life-knowing state cultivators in this universe. Why are there so few? Because breaking through to life-knowing state from primordial spirit state requires a lot of supreme-grade heavenly G crystals. This consumption is not something ordinary people can afford. Many people can't reach life-knowing state not because they are not talented enough, not because they don't work hard enough, but because they don't have money, understand? No money. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Indeed, cultivation requires a lot of money. Yang Yanxua said again, I don't know if this 1,000,000 supreme-grade heavenly G crystals is enough, but I feel that it might not be enough, so... She looked at Yi Xian and the corners of her mouth curled up. Brother, you have to think of a way to get more for me. She looked at Yi Xian and the corners of her mouth curled up. Big brother, you have to think of a way to get more for me. Yang Yanxua pointed at the storage ring on her hand. This life-knowing state cultivator's storage ring has many divine items and we can auction them. We should be able to get some, but it might not be enough. In any case, you do as you see fit. I'm going to cultivate. When I reach life-knowing state, I'll protect you. With that, she entered Xiao. In the room, Yi Xian felt a headache coming on. This big sister is too unreliable. Find her some heavenly G crystals. Yi Xian sighed in a low voice and then left the room. He looked around. Xuanji. Old man Profound Secrets appeared in front of Yi Xian and he bowed deeply. What can I do for you, senior? Yi Xian said with a smile. Is there any auction here? Old man Profound Secrets smiled. Of course there is. What do you want to buy, senior? Yi Xian shook his head. I want to sell some miscellaneous items that I don't need. Old man Profound Secrets hurriedly said, I'll arrange it. Yi Xian smiled. Then I'll trouble you. Old man Profound Secrets hurriedly shook his head. It's no trouble. Senior, please wait a moment, I'll inform you after I arrange it. Yi Xian nodded. All right. Old man Profound Secrets turned and left. At this time Yi Xian turned to the side. Miss Xiong Ho, come out. Not far away, Xiong Ho slowly walked out from the corner of the street. Yi Xian looked at Xiong Ho and smiled. You've been with me for a long time. Xiong Ho said solemnly, let's cooperate. Yi Xian blinked. Cooperate. Xiong Ho nodded. Yi Xian's lips curled up. Miss Xiong Ho, I gave you a chance once but you didn't care. Now you want to cooperate? Sorry, I don't want to. With that he turned and left. At this time Xiong Ho suddenly smiled. I have a secret, you'll definitely be interested. Yi Xian didn't stop. Xiong Ho said, someone is planning to kill you. Kill me? Yi Xian smiled disdainfully. Under 3 swords I'm invincible. Above 3 swords I'll trade 1 for 1. Chapter 1933. Arrogant. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Xiong Ho knew that this fellow was completely arrogant now. However, he had the capital to be arrogant now. This fellow had several peak essence soul realm experts by his side. Even she did not dare to approach him. Xiong Ho was silent for a moment before sighing softly. She had lost her best opportunity. Originally she could have worked with Yi Xian, and working with Yi Xian would have been extremely beneficial to her. However, she had been too greedy at that time. That greed had caused her to lose her best opportunity. Moments later Xiong Ho turned and left. After Yi Xian returned to his room he slowly closed his eyes. Xiong Ho had said that someone wanted to kill him. Who could it be? The first person he thought of was Shinqin. However, with Shinqin's strength, it was impossible for him to come looking for trouble alone. In other words, there was someone else. King Martial Spirit? God of the Wilderness? Yi Xian fell into deep thought. Anything was possible. At that moment, Su Wang suddenly appeared before Yi Xian. Yi Xian was slightly taken aback, then overjoyed. Essence Soul Realm? Su Wang bowed deeply. Master, I have reached the Essence Soul Realm. Essence Soul Realm. Yi Xian smiled. Not bad at all. With that said, he brought Su Wang into Xiaota. Inside Xiaota, Yi Xian looked at Su Wang. Now I will teach you a sword technique that I created. This sword technique is called Life-Death Draw. This sword technique is too powerful, so I will just casually show it to you so that it doesn't destroy this universe. With that said, he drew his sword and slashed. A beam of sword light slashed down and the entire space-time turned illusory. Su Wang was shocked. This is stacking? Yi Xian nodded. I just stacked 6,000 of them. Come try it. Su Wang hurriedly nodded. All right. Under Yi Xian's guidance, Su Wang began to practice draw the sword to determine life and death. Needless to say, Su Wang's natural talent in the sword Dao was truly terrifying. It didn't take him long to learn the sword draw of life and death. Moreover, he was able to stack a few thousand sword strikes as soon as he learned it. This made Yi Xian blush with shame. After a long time, Su Wang stopped. She looked at Yi Xian and said excitedly, Master, I can now stack 5,000 sword draws to determine life and death. Yi Xian smiled faintly. Don't be satisfied. You should know that if I use my full strength, I can overlay 100,000 Daos with a single thought. 100,000. Su Wang's eyes widened in disbelief. You can stack up to 100,000? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Su Wang's expression gradually turned solemn. How terrifying would it be if 100,000 swords were drawn to determine life and death? Yi Xian smiled and said, Take your time. Su Wang nodded. Understood. Yi Xian passed a spatial ring to Su Wang. Cultivating this sword skill will consume a lot of energy. There are 50,000 supreme-grade heavenly crystals in this spatial ring. It should be enough for you to cultivate for a while. Let me know if you have any questions or needs. He left Xiaota as soon as he finished speaking. Su Wang gazed at the spatial ring in his hand and fell silent for a long time. No one had ever been so nice to her. A short while later, Su Wang put the spatial ring away and started to cultivate. Outside Xiaota, Yi Xian was slightly excited. Su Wang had reached the primordial spirit realm. If she used sword draws to determine life and death with the green profound sword, she would definitely be invincible in the primordial spirit realm. Moreover, she might even be able to fight a life-knowing realm cultivator. After all, that was the green profound sword. It was definitely an existence that could challenge those of a higher realm. Besides that, Sister Xue might be able to attain the life-knowing realm as well. If Sister Xue could attain the life-knowing realm, it would naturally be extremely beneficial to him. However, the consumption of energy for Sister Xue to attain the life-knowing realm was truly too great. Up until now, Sister Xue had already consumed over 100,000 supreme-grade extreme heaven crystals. At this rate, 1,000,000 crystals would probably be far from enough. He had to think of a way to obtain more extreme heaven crystals. At this moment there was a sudden knock on the door. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts and looked outside the door. Come in. The door opened and old man Xuanji walked in. He bowed slightly and said, Senior, the auction is about to begin. Yi Xian smiled. So soon? Old man Xuanji smiled. I dare not delay Senior's arrangements. Yi Xian laughed. Then let's go. He and old man Xuanji disappeared from the room. Heaven's Fate City Xuanji Pavilion. The Xuanji Pavilion was old man Xuanji's territory. This time the auction would be held in old man Xuanji's Xuanji Pavilion. Old man Xuanji had stayed in Heaven's Fate City for over 1,000,000 years. His influence was extremely great. Under his arrangements, basically all the influential people in Heaven's Fate City had come. Of course, the main reason was still Yi Xian. This was because old man Xuanji had advertised that a life-knowing state expert would be auctioning divine items. A life-knowing state expert. How could the items of a life-knowing state expert be ordinary? In a short while, the entire Xuanji Pavilion was filled with over 100 experts. There weren't many people, but the weakest was at the primordial spirit realm. In old man Xuanji's words, those below the primordial spirit realm were all paupers. There was no point in participating in the auction. Old man Xuanji brought Yi Xian to a small pavilion. This small pavilion just happened to have a view of the entire auction venue below. Old man Xuanji bowed slightly. May I know what divine items Senior is auctioning? Xian handed the storage ring in his hand to Old Man Xuanji. It's all inside. Old Man Xuanji glanced at it and his expression changed drastically. This? He looked at Xian. Senior, are you selling all these divine items? Xian nodded. The divine items left behind by the life-knowing state expert were all very good. However, to him, apart from the guardian ring, the rest were basically useless. Because he had the Azure Profound Sword and Xiaota, he really didn't care about the other divine items. Old Man Xuanji smiled bitterly. Senior, if these divine items are released, they will definitely shock them. Xian laughed. As long as they can be sold for a good price. Old Man Xuanji smiled. That's for sure. Senior, please take a seat. I'll go make the arrangements. He turned and left after saying this. Xian looked around and then sat down. He closed his eyes slightly. At this moment he was thinking. If his enemies wanted to touch him, how would they do it? The answer was that they would definitely wait until he was alone before making a move. At this point Xian's pupils suddenly shrank. He hurriedly looked around. There was nothing around him. Xian tried hard to calm himself down. A moment later a smile appeared on his face. Since you're already here, come on out. No response. Xian frowned slightly. Is there really no one here? A moment later Xian leaned back on the chair and said, since you're already here, come on out. Still no response. Xian would say this every quarter of an hour. He had nothing better to do anyway. The auction had begun. The first divine item had caused the experts in the auction hall to be excited. The first divine item was a spear that contained many special space-time abilities. The starting price was 10,000 heavenly crystal. In just a short while the price had increased to 30,000 heavenly crystal. It might seem like a small amount, but it was actually a lot. Because the heavenly crystal was too precious in this place. In the pavilion Xian would say this every 15 minutes. Since you're already here, come on out. Just like that, time trickled by. Around 2 hours later, Xian had earned 200,000 heavenly crystal. When one of the divine items was sold, Xian said again, since you're already here, come on out. As soon as he finished speaking, a shadow suddenly appeared behind him. Sensing the shadow behind him, Xian's expression changed drastically. Damn it! There's really someone here. The shadow said in a hoarse voice, how did you find me? Xian's expression was calm. Get lost. The shadow hesitated for a moment before it vanished silently. Sensing the shadow's disappearance, Xian heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Damn it! Someone really wants to kill me. Who could it be? Pinchin. Thinking of this, Xian's expression turned gloomy. Damn it! This damned woman. Outside the auction house, somewhere in the clouds, a woman looked down at the auction in silence. That woman was the Xianxia. Moreover, there was a middle-aged man by the woman's side, and it was the Martial Spirit King. The reason the Martial Spirit King had come to target Xian again was because he'd investigated Xian's origins, and he'd personally investigated Xian. Xian wasn't at the Destiny realm at all. This fellow was just putting on an act. Xianxia suddenly said, will that fellow succeed? The Martial Spirit King smiled. Don't worry, Brother Dark Addiction's concealment technique is peerless in the world. Besides true Destiny realm experts, even I wouldn't be able to notice him. On the other hand, Xian is merely a cultivator of the seamless path. It's utterly impossible for him to notice Brother Dark Addiction. Xianxia spoke in a low voice, don't underestimate that fellow. Even though his cultivation is low, he has quite a few divine items in his possession. We can't be careless. The Martial Spirit King was just about to speak when a shadow suddenly appeared in front of him. The Martial Spirit King was delighted when he saw the shadow, and he hurriedly asked, Brother Dark Addiction, did you succeed? Dark Addiction's expression was extremely unsightly. Martial Spirit King, is there something wrong with you? Is there something wrong with your head? The Martial Spirit King was stunned. Brother Dark Addiction, what do you mean? Dark Addiction said angrily, what do I mean? Didn't you tell me that the young man is only a cultivator of the seamless path? Not a Destiny realm expert at all? The Martial Spirit King said, yes. He's only a cultivator of the seamless path, not a Destiny realm expert at all. What's wrong? Did something go wrong? Dark Addiction was furious. Something went wrong? I almost didn't make it back. The Martial Spirit King said in a low voice, Brother Dark Addiction, Were you discovered by Mu Sin and Old Man Profundity? Dark Addiction said coldly, they didn't notice me. The martial spirit king was slightly puzzled. Then, Dark Addiction said angrily, then my ass. As soon as I entered the pavilion, that young man noticed me before my feet even touched the ground. You actually said he's not a Destiny Realm expert? Martial Spirit King, there's no enmity between us, so why are you trying to harm me? Fortunately, that senior didn't intend to kill me. Otherwise, I would have fucking died there. The Martial Spirit King and Xianxia were dumbfounded. P.S. When will you become famous after writing for 5 years? Chapter 1934. King Martial Spirit spoke in a low voice. Brother Dark Addiction, you said that Zhou Xian noticed you? Dark Addiction spoke in a low voice. Do you think I'm lying to you? King Martial Spirit and Xianxia exchanged glances, and there was a wisp of shock in their eyes. Xianxia spoke in a low voice. I told you that fellow isn't simple. King Martial Spirit was about to speak, but Dark Addiction suddenly turned around. Who is it? The three of them turned around and saw a man walking over slowly from not too far away. It was Zhou Xian. Their expressions were quite unsightly when they saw Zhou Xian. It was especially so for Dark Addiction. Not only was his expression unsightly, there was even a wisp of fear in his eyes. Zhou Xian gazed at Dark Addiction and smiled. Is there enmity between you and King Martial Spirit and Miss Xianxia? Dark Addiction fell silent. Meanwhile, King Martial Spirit spoke abruptly. Zhou Xian, you're not a Destiny Realm expert at all. Zhou Xian roared with laughter. Destiny Realm? King Martial Spirit, what a joke. As he spoke, he suddenly said, kill him. As soon as he finished speaking, a ray of light flashed. The space here was instantly torn apart. King Martial Spirit's expression instantly changed drastically, and he charged forward and slammed his fist forward. A powerful force erupted from his fist like a volcano, and it instantly caused the entire city to seethe. The expressions of all the experts within the city changed drastically, and they raised their heads to look up into the clouds. Bang! High above in the clouds, an expanse of sword light suddenly exploded, and then a middle-aged man retreated repeatedly. It was King Martial Spirit. As soon as King Martial Spirit stopped, his body instantly transformed into nothingness and only his soul remained. It wasn't Zhou Xian who attacked, but Su Wang who detained the Origin Spirit Realm. King Martial Spirit gazed at Su Wang with disbelief. You've actually attained the Origin Spirit Realm, and your combat strength is actually so terrifying. Dark Addiction and Xianxia's expressions were extremely unsightly as well. Both of them hadn't expected Su Wang's strength to be so terrifying. He shattered King Martial Spirit's body with a single strike of his sword. Meanwhile, Su Wang glanced coldly at King Martial Spirit, who only had his soul left. How dare trash like you scheme against my master? Master. King Martial Spirit narrowed his eyes. Who is your master? In the distance, Zhou Xian smiled and said, who do you think it is? King Martial Spirit's pupils suddenly constricted. You're just a seamless Dao, how can you be her master? Seamless Dao? Zhou Xian laughed. Martial Spirit King, you are really too funny. King Martial Spirit said angrily, Zhou Xian, stop pretending. If you have the ability, then do it yourself. Come do it. You think you're worthy? At this moment, a voice came from the side. Everyone heard the voice and looked over. Not far away, Mu Sin and Old Man Profound Secrets were slowly walking over. Old Man Profound Secrets looked coldly at King Martial Numinous. An ant like you is worthy of a senior? King Martial Spirit stared at Old Man Profound Secrets. Old Man Profound Secrets, you have lived for millions of years. Is your intelligence so low? This guy is just using the seamless Dao. Can't you tell? Old Man Profound Secrets said angrily, shut up. King Martial Spirit, you're a veteran Essence Soul Realm powerhouse at any rate. Why is your intelligence so low? King Martial Spirit said angrily, we will know if he's at the Destiny Knowing Realm the moment he makes a move. Get him to make a move. Old Man Profound Secrets said angrily, how can an ant like you be worthy of a senior? Do you know that when we entered the ancient ruins, a senior instantly killed a Destiny Knowing Realm expert with a single sword strike? We saw it with our own eyes, so how can it be fake? King Martial Spirit was stunned, and then he said, absolutely impossible. This Zhou Xian is just a human from a low-level civilization. It's impossible for him to be at the Destiny Knowing Realm. He's just an ant. Old Man Profound Secrets shook his head and looked at King Martial's spirit with a trace of pity in his eyes. This child is too stupid. There's no saving him. At this moment Yi Xian smiled and said, "Kill him." As soon as he finished speaking, Xiuwang suddenly vanished on the spot. King Martial's spirit's expression changed drastically and he hurriedly said, "Miss Xianxia, save me." Xianxia didn't stop Xiuwang and she charged towards Yi Xian instead. She was very clearly aware that so long as everyone found out that Yi Xian was a fake destiny-knowing realm expert, then Yi Xian would be finished. Yi Xian smiled as he gazed at Xianxia and he had no intention to attack. Meanwhile, Musen obstructed Yi Xian's path while a wisp of viciousness flashed through his eyes. "Are you even worthy of attacking a senior?" As he spoke he charged forward. Bang! Xianxia was forced to a stop by a powerful force. Xianxia was about to attack again when she seemed to have noticed something, and she suddenly turned around. A ray of light flashed from afar, and then the green profound sword pierced directly into the center of King Martial Spirit's forehead. After that, it started to madly absorb King Martial Spirit's soul. It was gone. The expressions of all the nascent soul realm experts in the surroundings turned slightly solemn when they witnessed this scene. After all of them were at the nascent soul realm, and their strengths were on par with King Martial Spirit. However, Xiuwang had been able to kill King Martial Spirit with 2 strikes of the sword. What did this mean? It meant that Xiuwang could kill them with 2 strikes of the sword as well. Mu Xin and Old Man Profundity exchanged glances. Since Xiuwang became Yi Xian's follower, his strength has grown at a terrifying rate. On the other side, Dark Addiction glanced at the surroundings, and then he vanished without a trace. "Flee first." Yi Xian glanced at Dark Addiction, but he didn't stop him. Of course he couldn't stop him as well. Yi Xian gazed at Xianxia and smiled. "Miss Xianxia, we've known each other for a long time and I didn't intend to kill all of you. However, you've repeatedly challenged my patience and I can't tolerate it any longer." As he spoke he gazed at Xiuwang. Xiuwang understood his intentions, and he transformed into a ray of light that vanished on the spot. The space here was instantly torn apart. Xianxia's expression instantly changed drastically. She suddenly pressed her palms together and then she pressed them forward lightly. In an instant, countless strands of space suddenly condensed into a spatial wall. Defend. At this moment the space where Xianxia resided was instantly impregnable. However, as soon as Xiuwang's attack arrived, the impregnable spatial wall was easily torn apart like tofu. A strand of light pierced through the center of Xianxia's forehead. At the instant that it vanished, Xiuwang had appeared behind Xianxia. However, the green profound sword was still there. Instant kill. A deathly silence filled the surroundings. Mu Xin and Old Man Profundity's gazes had been constantly fixed on the green profound sword. At this moment, they'd noticed that it wasn't that Xiuwang's combat strength was too abnormal, it was the sword itself that was too abnormal. The sword's boost to Xiuwang's battle prowess was just too high. Xianxia gazed at Yi Xian with slight disbelief. "You?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "If I die then so be it. Be more straightforward. Don't waste your breath. Have a safe journey." As soon as he finished speaking he issued a command in his heart, and the green profound sword completely absorbed Xianxia's soul. Yi Xian smiled. "Let's go." As soon as he finished speaking he turned around and left. Meanwhile, Old Man Profundity spoke in a low voice. "Senior, the wilderness god and Zhou Xian are on the other side. Should we?" Yi Xian glanced to the right and smiled. "I'm someone who doesn't offend me so I won't be annoyed. Let's go." As soon as he finished speaking he vanished into the distance. Mu Xin, who stood by Old Man Profundity's side, suddenly smiled. "It's said that experts are capricious and have strange tempers. However, I feel that not only is Senior not capricious, but he's also willing to reason with others. Most importantly, he's approachable and easy to get along with." Old Man Profundity nodded and smiled. "Senior is indeed approachable and has a warm personality. It's our fortune to have met Senior." Mu Xin shook his head and smiled. "Miss Xiuwang is the greatest fortune." Old Man Profundity shook his head and smiled as well. Indeed, Old Man Profundity shook his head and smiled bitterly as well. Actually, the one who benefited the most was Xiuwang. This woman was absolutely invincible amongst those of the same realm of cultivation. Moments later the two of them left. After the two of them left, Xianxia withdrew his gaze from the clouds and sighed softly. I tried to persuade King Marshall's spirit, but he just couldn't accept it. This unwillingness caused his millions of years of bitter cultivation to turn into nothingness. Next to him, Wilderness God smiled. Greed. Zhou Xian looked into the distance with a complicated expression. Wilderness God, do you think that young Master Yi is at the destiny-knowing state? Wilderness God shook his head. It's no longer important. Zhou Xian smiled. I think it's quite important. How should I put it? Think about it, if he really isn't at the destiny-knowing state, then why are Mu Xin and the others so loyal to him? Are they all idiots? Obviously not. Also, did you see that Shuang woman? She was only at the life god realm at the beginning, but she reached the primordial spirit realm not long after she followed Yi Xian. Most importantly, her combat strength has reached such a level. Do you think that's normal? Wilderness God fell silent. Zhou Xian said, there's something else. Didn't you notice? Mu Xin and the others are becoming more and more respectful to Yi Xian. If Yi Xian isn't at the destiny-knowing state, why would they be so respectful to him? Wilderness God frowned. You mean that Yi Xian is really at the destiny-knowing state? Zhou Xian said, I can't be sure. But what I can be sure of is that even if Yi Xian isn't at the destiny-knowing state, he's definitely not an ordinary person. The Wilderness God glanced at Zhou Xian, a little speechless. Isn't that obvious? That guy is dressed in divine equipment. Even if he isn't at the destiny-knowing state, there must be a destiny-knowing state big shot behind him. At this point he didn't say anything else. Zhou Xian smiled. Destiny-knowing state. Then he looked into the distance with a complicated expression and said softly, do you think they'll get Yi Xian's help to break through the primordial spirit realm and reach the destiny-knowing state? Wilderness God's expression changed when he heard that. Zhou Xian said in a deep voice, it's not impossible. Wilderness God looked into the distance. Should we go and rely on him as well? Zhou Xian said nothing. After Yi Xian returned to the auction house, he continued to watch the auction. By then he had already earned more than 500,000 heaven crystals. And the divine items were not even half sold. The lifetime collection of a destiny-knowing state super expert was naturally not an ordinary amount. Inside the pavilion, Shuang stood behind Yi Xian, holding the green profound sword in her hand. She was now Yi Xian's super bodyguard. At that moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the auction house below. The Zhao family wants all the divine items in today's auction. Everyone please give my Zhao family some face. If it's what I want, don't bid.